a cot, so I need to take a little cat
And I
nap.
took your sandwich, but it was the same thing.
Okay, no problem. I'll forgive you this time. I don't want it back.
It's been, yeah, this doesn't taste like my normal sandwich. Oh, okay.
All right, it is 1:15. We're going to restart our workshop here this afternoon.
Okay.
Give staff just a minute to get seated here. And we are on item E3, our Parks and Rec impact fee study, and I will hand it back over to Mr. Gibo and our consultant.
All right, well, thank you very much. Well, Council, Vice Mayor, once again, I'm Eric Gibo, architect for the Stormwater and Engineering Department, here with Sean Ocasio and Carl Cody to take you through the recreation impact fee process. So the goal of Parks and Recreation facilities is to make Palm Coast a desirable place to live and to enhance the quality of life for all citizens. I'll briefly discuss the background behind the development of the fee study, projects in the CIP that were used in the analysis and rate determination, and then I'll turn it over back to Sean to present the findings of the study. So the basis for the impact fee study is the Parks and Rec Master Plan as part of a county-wide initiative that involved many steps over a year-long process. That included input from citizens through public meetings, surveys, and questionnaires. The plan identifies all the future parks and recreation amenities and facilities needed to maintain the current level of service. The projects presented in the upcoming slides are derived from this plan that was adopted by City Council in 2023. At this point, I'll take you through some of the projects planned for the next 10 years that evolved from the Parks Master Plan and make up the basis for the rate study. The land that makes up the Long Creek Nature Preserve is a major archaeological resource, the Hernandez Landing Site, related to the early 1800s plantation period in Florida. The city purchased the land for the preserve in 2008 through a Florida Community Trust and Flagler County Environmentally Sensitive Lands Program grants. The FCT grant identified specific conditions that the city must provide in order to receive these funds. The multiple phases of this project have been designed to address these requirements. The final phase of the project, currently in the 5-year CIP, includes a nature center, classrooms, exhibit spaces, a restroom building, and associated site improvements. The city is looking at potential grant opportunities to assist in the funding of the project. Phase 2 of the Waterfront Park project is a final piece in the development of the city's only park located along the Intercoastal Waterway. The first phase was the construction of the original park back in 2010. The subsequent improvements included the dredging of the canal, concrete pad installation to support amenities associated with the kayak launch, shoreline stabilization, floating dock installation, and general site work. These phases were completed in part with fine grants totaling more than $1.2 million. This final phase will be the expansion of the parking, a covered events pavilion, upgraded site lighting, site furnishings, and educational kiosks. The city has been awarded a total of over $630,000 in fine grants for this work. The Parks Master Plan identified the need for additional neighborhood parks and made the recommendations regarding potential locations. The 10-year CIP includes budget numbers for 3 parks to address the needs outlined in the plan. Phase 2 of the Graham Swamp Trail is a 12-foot wide, multi-use path that is part of the state Sun Trail network that completes the gap between the Lehigh Trail and the existing Graham Swamp Trail and provides a connection to the County Trail Bridge over State Road 100. The project is partially funded through an FDOT grant for design, and the city is seeking additional grant opportunities to fund construction. In October of last year, staff presented 2 options to Council for the expansion of the community center parking and the future of Fire Station 22. The directive was that the existing building would remain, and options for renovating and repurposing the building into alternate uses would be developed and presented back to Council. Programming ideas to be explored included its use as a history museum, an arts venue, or various other public events gathering spaces. The building site and adjacent parcel was to be developed, allowing for 90 new spaces or 228 total spaces available to serve the community center. We are currently in the programming phase of the project, and as with other projects, the city is actively exploring grant opportunities. The Parks and Rec Master Plan identified the lack of a skate park as a deficit in the park's inventory. This has also been a recurring subject of park enthusiasts through various public engagement events, online comments, and questionnaire responses. Though a location has not yet been determined, the 10-year CIP includes a budget for this to address this need, and the city will seek collaboration with the county to complete the project. Phase 3 of the Southern Recreation Center is the continuation of the master plan implementation. The Palm Coast Tennis Center, originally built in 2007, included 10 clay courts, associated parking, and a modular building. The completion of Phase 1 of the expansion in 2023 was the construction of the tennis facility, 6 covered and 6 uncovered pickleball courts, and associated site improvements. A $700,000 USTA grant allowed for the construction of 4 new clay courts and 1 championship stadium court, completed in 2024. Due to the success and high volume attendance, Phase 3 of the master plan involves the much-needed parking expansion and the construction of remote restroom facilities and a maintenance building to support the functions of the facility. The city's current number of sports fields are not able to fulfill the needs of the residents. Additional lighted fields are desperately needed. These would be in addition to any sports activity center, as the new fields are needed to serve local sports programs, especially when the activity center is being utilized for tournaments. Water access is a component that is of high priority for residents.
I'm sorry, sir, can you go back, please?
Oh, sure.
All right. So where is this on the map? I'm looking at the top left. Where is this?
That was some land up off of US 1. The existing public works site was initially swapped land that we had with the developer for development of a sports complex. When we identified that site to be the preferred site and large enough tract for the mock, we purchased some land south of PV grade, which we've now been looking to market that as, you know, an economic industrial park. So we don't have a site for the sports complex. There's no existing land that's large enough to build a you know, multi-field complex. So it may entail purchasing of some land.
With lighting, right?
What's that?
With lighting.
With lighting, right. A standalone sports complex with lighting, additional fields are desperately needed somewhere.
Right. Okay.
I just want to clarify Carl's statement about a sports complex. So in your next presentation about economic development, you will hear a little bit more about Track 17, which was purchased as part of the mock process, et cetera. So we'll talk more about that. So it could be a site for a sports complex if you wanted it to be, or you could allow it to continue to be your industrial area that you want as well. So that will be kind of like a decision point that City Council will need to give us today. And then also, these two facilities aren't the same. One is a sports complex based off current recreation need, and one is built more as a tourism model that's bringing in outside visitors, et cetera. It includes a recreational component, but it's not exclusively just for recreation. So there are two different models there.
You're talking about the complex that's been talked about out west?
Yes.
Okay. For this specific budget, how much of this budget is supposed to be land acquisition?
It should be in the backup to the packet. I want to say it was $8 million, but I'm just going from memory.
How large of a piece of property do you all anticipate would be needed for this?
We identified acres, I want to say it was 100 acres.
Yeah, I think that's
for like a 10 to 12 field complex. It all depends on wetlands and other areas of the site, you know, configuration.
Okay. Thank you.
It could be 70 acres. I'm trying to remember how big Track 17 was that we purchased.
Well, Track 17, I think, is
So
68.
68. And
Okay,
then
so maybe it was 70 then.
Yeah, and then just to also clarify, the sports complex that has been talked about out west is not included in this impact fee calculation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was my next question.
It just says 8.4 million for land acquisition.
8.4.
Okay. Track 17 is actually 103 acres, but there's
103
some wetlands on there.
Oh, okay.
About
So-
65 acres of uplands, I think.
Okay. So we've got about 65, yeah, I knew it was 60-something, 65 of buildable or developable,
Yeah.
we should say, acreage. Okay.
So Carl, I looked it up, it was 8.4 for the land acquisition.
Thank you. Matanzas Woods Canoe and Kayak Launch. So water access is a component that is a high priority for residents. The city has limited water access to its waterways. The site was donated to the city as part of an adjacent residential development and includes a floating canoe and kayak launch. The design has been completed and is ready to proceed to construction. The city lacks a cultural arts venue. The beginning of a venue has been started in the town center with a stage and restrooms. This facility will share a site for a future YMCA facility. The next phase in development is to cover the stage and to complete work to collaborate and connect with the Y. The highly popular Indian Trail Sports Complex is the home to the Palm Coast Little League and is a jewel in the Parks and Recreation inventory. The proposed improvements to the facility involve the addition of lighting to serve the ball fields, 5 through 8, and the construction of much-needed parking expansion, which will increase capacity by 137 spaces. In addition, the plan includes the lighting of 3 northern multi-use fields behind Indian Trails Middle School. The Volusia Flagler County YMCA is seeking collaboration from city, county, Flagler schools, and other partners to assist in moving forward with a new YMCA facility. The city has budgeted $3 million for the new facility in Town Center. This highly anticipated project will fill a desperate need for neighborhood facilities of this type and will play a large part in the development of Town Center into a true city hub and provide a modern aquatic facility that will meet current standards. So in summary, this slide identifies all of the 10-year CIP projects presented, along with their respective costs, totaling roughly $90 million. Completion of these projects will allow the city to continue to provide its citizens with a high level of service they have come to enjoy and continue the history of Palm Coast as an attractive destination and a great place to live and work. Since existing residents will also benefit from these new facilities, capacity fees can only be utilized for the proportion of the new dwelling units. Currently, this equates to the existing residents funding 46.7% of the project costs. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sean.
Again, just for the record, name is Sean Ocasio with Raftellus Financial Consultants. So one thing I want to mention here, we're going to be talking about the Parks and Recreation Impact Fee Analysis now. You're going to find a lot of, again, just like what I introed in the fire presentation, there's a lot of shared concepts here as well, the same general methodologies of fee calculation, the rules on impact fees, and so on. One thing I will say, though, is with Parks and Recreation, these are sometimes some of the more unique fees and can have quite a bit of variability in terms of fee levels and other things. And that's because there's, each community is a little more unique and can determine what it needs or what it wants to have in terms of facilities and amenities that it's going to provide its residents and to some extent use that to kind of attract growth to the community as well. So there's a little bit more difference there. I just wanted to mention. Another shared item, just like on the fire side, the calculation approach that we're using is also what I called, you may remember that hybrid method, which is we're looking at the existing investment in Parks and Recreation assets, we're looking at the planned future investment as well, and we're weighing those, against each other. Again, we think it's a little more conservative to make sure we're recognizing, some of those historical costs as well. Again, we are looking at some significant increases here, just like on the fire side. Yeah, we can move forward. So one thing here, the next few slides in the presentation are pretty much identical to what was just presented on the fire side. So I won't, belabor these, but we have the information on impact fees themselves, what they are, who pays them, and what you can use them for. The next slide is, again, benefits to the community for having right-size fees in place, and there's legal considerations. Again, the same set of rules that we talked about before apply here. And legal considerations, again, all the same items in terms of the legislation there. Phasing requirements, maximums, all that still applies here, just like it did on fire, just like it did on transportation. Same criteria for the purposes of design and what you can use the money for and what you can't, and making sure you have reasonable service levels and so on. So kind of sprinting forward to this next slide here on fee calculation methodology. It's almost the same slide that you saw before with a slight difference, and that's because whereas on the fire side you're charging on the fire side you're charging a fire impact fee to residential and non-residential development. On the recreation side, you're only charging that to residential development. So that step in the analysis, we talked about using call data and square footage and some other items to split the costs. We don't have to do that in this instance because it's only residential land uses that are accounted for here. So moving ahead, you'll notice this is the same population projection curve and dwelling unit curve that was described previously. One thing I'll mention here is while, again, we're designing these fees from the perspective of a design window of through 2035, we did look at the costs in terms of how they relate to the estimated build-out. And the reason there is these are, parks are very long-lived assets. The land and everything there, it's a very long-lived asset as opposed to, let's say, a fire truck or something like that. So we tried to make sure our horizon was a little bit longer to account for those items there. So you'll see in a number of the subsequent slides, we're taking the cost side and scaling it to build out, but then bringing it back down to 2035. And that'll come through on the subsequent slides here. So, in terms of level of service for recreation and parks, the current service standard is 8 acres per 1,000 of population, and that general requirement is broken out into 3 acres of resource-based parkland and excuse me, and 5 acres of activity-based parkland. That's what gets you the 8. Now, currently, based on the current inventory of total acreage and the different parks, the city's providing almost 10 acres per 1,000 of population. So you're definitely meeting your LOS or your level of service targets there. That comes to about just over 1,000 total acres of existing parklands spread out across about 17 different locations and facilities, which include, an aquatic center, racquetball courts, nature trails, playgrounds, all those sorts of different facilities and amenities that the community has. Jumping into the cost side, first I'll aim at the historical investment. So currently existing investment in Parks and Recreation is about $110.3 million. That's again as of the close of 2024. And again, we tried to break it out similarly. General equipment's about $0.2 million, which is excluded from the calculation. And then the rest that's facilities related is about $110.1 million. So then from there, based on the historical grant information that was provided to us, there's about $6.5 million of assets that have been funded through other sources. So we've made sure to net those costs out away from the totals that you were looking at a moment ago. So that gives us a total net investment going from that $10.3 million in total. What's included for calculation purposes about $103.6 million after the grants and the smaller equipment items are accounted for and removed. So then, again, accounting for the long useful life of these types of assets, we're taking that $103.6 million of investment, of current investment, and dividing through by the projected build-out population of just over 230,000 persons to get us a net total investment per person at build-out of about $450.12. We then, to scale it to our time horizon of 2035, we take that $450.12 and apply that to the projected 2035 population of about 132,000 and change to give us an allocated investment through 2035 and existing of about $59.6 million. Moving to the forward-looking side, when we look at the total planned future investment in Parks and Recreation through build-out, that, again, accounting for an estimate of inflation, that comes to about $236.3 million in total projects and facilities, and that includes expansions and upgrades, new facilities, new parks, special use facilities, trails, and so on. And then from that $236.3 million total number, we're then pulling out from it or netting out against it about $9.2 million in grant and other funding sources. So that's a total net investment, planned future net investment of about $227 million of project cost. Again, taking the same approach I mentioned on the prior slide, since these are very long-lived assets, we're taking that future investment, dividing it through by build-out of 230,000 persons and change to get an average cost per person on the forward-looking side of about $986.74. So then to scale that to 2035, we're taking the 986.74, again, times that 132,000 persons to get a total planned future investment through 2035 of about $130.6 million. So now we have that 59 million and change that I mentioned on the prior slide, and then the 130 million I just mentioned to give us a total that you'll see on this tabulation here of about $190 million of total planned future investment and existing investment in the Parks and Recreation Department. Net of, again, grants and contributions and funding from other sources. So then taking that whole bucket of cost, if you will, of $190.2 million, dividing out through the projected population in 2035, again, because that $190 million is scaled through 2035, that gives us an average cost per person of $1,436.86. then since that's the cost per person and we're trying to bring this cost on a per dwelling unit basis, that's where we use the 5.2 persons per dwelling unit that we talked about a little while ago on the fire side, again, from the Census Bureau occupancy data. And we take the $1,400 and change times the 2.52 to give us a fee of $3,620.89, and then we just round it down from there to the $3,620 that you see at the bottom of that tabulation. So in terms of the increase level, like I said on the front end, it's a significant increase. We're going from a current fee of $1,820.01 to $3,620. That's a change of $1,791.99, or about a 98% fee increase. So it's in the same kind of ballpark as fire that we were seeing earlier. Now, in terms of the comparable here, again, it's the same surveyed communities that we looked at. And you'll see you're on the right side there with your existing fee of $1,800 and change, and it would put you at the highest one there on the comparison at about the $3,620 level compared to the surveyed average of $1,438. A couple things I wanted to note here, aside from what I had mentioned previously about these are snapshot points in time. You don't know what the full fee level was for these other communities or how long they've waited to update theirs. These can vary much more, I don't want to say wildly, but there's a lot more variance in terms of these comparisons. And what I mean is, I have some clients on the southeast coast, and there's some other comparables we look at if we look broader across the state. Recreation fees can go as high as City of Miami, I believe, is almost $6,000. It's like $5,900 and something. Boca Raton is like $4,000. Coral Gables is almost $5,800 per dwelling unit there. So you can see these big swings. I wanted to mention those just as a part of this, even though they're not as local to you. I wanted you to at least see the breadth of variability in residential fees for this type of thing. And one thing I would note here, again, the fee level here is at least in part a representation of the capital cost of the facilities that you're wanting to bring into the community and offer to the community and to new growth. So one thing, at least, I'll say this anecdotally, and I want to be cautious to how I say it, but at least in my experience on these types of projects, what I've seen, and again, it's not a scientific observation, but it seems to be the trend that the communities that seem to have higher impact fees still have a very healthy level of growth. And part of the reason for that is that the higher that the fees are, it's a representation of the investment that the community is making in that particular service. So if you're having higher, impact fees, let's say for parks and recreation, it's generally a function of you have, maybe a higher level of service. You're providing 8 acres per thousand. Some communities provide 2, so there's more that's being offered there. So I guess I say that to say, we've seen a number of communities where it's come up, the concerns about the fees impact to growth. And there very well, can be an impact there. I don't want to diminish that. I would just say, our observation has been, an example comes to mind, I believe the city of Winter Garden wrestled with this very issue, and they still experienced quite substantial growth that was able to fund a lot of the capital needs for the community in that period of time where they were having significant growth. In terms of implementation considerations, same idea as before. This is a significant increase above the 50% cap that's built into the statute on the standard process. It's an increase of about 98%. So again, there's the option, of course, to stick with the statutory implementation method of 4-year phase-in up to the 50% increase and cap it there. Again, the fees would be under recovering in terms of the costs, but there could be some adjustments to projects and so on. Or you can pursue the full increase through extraordinary circumstance implementation to get that full fee level implemented in one fell swoop as opposed to phased in over time. In terms of the circumstances, they're essentially the same as what we talked about on the fire side, because it's the same issues that you're encountering. You have very high population growth historically and in the near term, and you have significant population growth projected in the near-term horizon. Again, historically at that 3.8% level for the past few years, and going forward at that 2.1% level on an average basis over the next 10. So again, significant growth there, and that growth is requiring these other facilities to be brought into service. Again, you're also encountering significant cost inflation to actually construct these facilities. Similar to what I mentioned on the fire side, it's been about a Just in the materials index, it's about a 40% increase in the index since 2019. So there's very significant material cost increases that are being felt here as a part of these projects. With respect to the fees, and if no fee increase is implemented, and assuming the same project load is to be accomplished, then there would be essentially a deficiency of about $17.8 million in project-related costs that would have to be recovered from existing residents, as opposed from the growth-related fees here through 2035. If you go through the phased approach through the statute, the 4-year phase-in capped at 50%, then that shortfall of the 17.8 would go down to about $10.1 million. That would have to be recovered from existing residents. Well, in conclusion, it's the same recommendations that we had on the fire side. Based on our discussions with city staff and everything, we believe that the city should consider adoption of the fully calculated fees for recreation using the extraordinary circumstance approach. You'd still want to maintain compliance in all standard forms with the Impact Fee Act requirements, accounting and compliance affidavits and so on. You want to review the fees in 4 years, again, to account for how growth actually came in to the community as opposed to how it was projected, how those capital costs actually materialized compared to what was projected, and adjust and fine-tune the fees accordingly at that point in time when the statute allows you to get another bite at the apple. And again, the discontinuation of the indexing practice we mentioned on the fire side, and making sure to have that 90-day grace period built into the adoption process.
And Vice Mayor, City Council, I just wanted to kind of elaborate a little bit on the background. The city has had an established Parks Master Plan since 2008, while the one that was presented to you today was a little bit newer. That's because we partnered with Flagler County. They did not have a Parks Master Plan, and so we worked together for them to have one and then establish a county-wide level of service. But mainly it was reaffirming the public's input about the facilities that were in our plan. So many of them carried over from the original Parks Master Plan in 2008.
Thank you for that. All right, questions or comments? We'll start with you, Councilman Gambaro.
None at this time. Yeah, thank you for the brief.
Councilman Sullivan?
Yes, Vice Mayor. Have we ever used ESL funds to purchase lands for parks?
ESL?
No,
You
no,
can,
we
but-
can.
Long Creek, I think half of,
We'll look into that. I know
Long
we
Creek was
received.
half county, half state.
Right. So we have a state grant for Longs Creek Nature Preserve, but we'll look into ESL.
Way of,
Sure.
for future, saving a little money,
Right.
another source of funding.
Because the state's grant does have requirements, and that's why the Nature Center is there in the projects for you today.
Anything else? Okay. Councilman Miller?
Yeah, I just had the similar question that I had on the other studies. The 9.2 million that's deducted based on grant-funded projects, is that specifically, it's on 31, I think.
Yeah, those, we have 2 current grants with Fine for Waterfront Park.
Right, yep.
And this, I'm not sure if the Long Creek one, because we finished it this fiscal year, if that's part of it, or if it was prior of the previous grant dollars. These are future grants. And we have current design money for Grand Swamp from DOT, and we're seeking construction dollars for the second part of Grand Swamp Trail.
So does this 9.2 million include a kind of like a placeholder for what we can expect to get, or is
Yeah,
it
it would be
just
for the
stuff that
construction. We have 3 grants existing, and we have 1 future grant for construction of Grand Swamp.
Okay.
That's like 7.5 million, I
I
think.
just wanted to, okay, so we have one for 10.5 million,
7.5 that we're hoping to get for Grand Swamp.
and that's included in this
That's,
9.2.
yes.
Okay.
So the bulk of that money is a hopeful future grant.
I just want to make sure we're being accurate with what we expect based on historical, right? When we talk about fire, it's, okay, that doesn't happen that often, but I feel like for parks, it does happen a little bit more often. We get bed tax money, we get all sorts of things that we've used in the past to try to fund, whether it's fined or state grants and things like that.
Yeah, with the grand swap being on the Centrail network, it gives us one more bucket of money to go after for funding.
Okay, I just want to make sure that this 9.2 is accurate. You know, if it needs to be adjusted to kind of match what we've seen in the past we get, so that we're being accurate with that and not trying to, you know, take it out of somebody else's pocket when we're going to get it from the state or somewhere else.
Right.
And I know we can't predict everything
The
that we're
best
going to get.
projection right now, I think it's a good number.
Okay, okay.
Just to follow up on that, you know, the Tourist Development Capital Improvement Program, every two-year program, it's kind of in abeyance right now, but there was money that came in for the Southern Recreation
Yep.
Center. It was like 700, I forget the
39,000.
number.
Yep.
But, so does that take, is that where that would be included if there was?
It would come off the top of our existing investment, because that was past dollars. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're projecting, like, if in the past we've gotten 800,000 a year in random grant money on an average over the last, you know, 5 or 10 years, whatever the case may be, are we putting that into this number forward so that we're not
Right.
asking somebody else for that money when
Right,
we're going to expect to
park
get
grants
it?
are difficult to get. If we do get some, they're usually small dollar, like Long Creek was 300-something thousand. Waterfront Park, you're
No, I
talking a few
understand,
hundred thousand. So we were safe. We are seeking like historical dollars or other dollars for conversion of Fire Station 22, but from what we've found so far, you know, we may get 50 grand potentially, possibly, but same with Long Creek. It's a very historical site. We're going after some, you know, some big dollars there, hopefully, but we never received them. There's not a lot of money out there
Yeah.
for those types of projects, so we didn't account for those dollars. We're going to seek dollars, which will help bring the cost down as we move forward, you know, with the projects, which would probably be outside it would be in the next rate study. So right now, our best projections are until we get to the next rate study, then we do updating on the grants.
Okay.
So I have kind of the same type of questions as the other studies, which is, number one, well, let me confirm, is the amount that we have in the current impact fee fund 3.1 million, roughly?
Oh, hold on, I have that pulled up.
It says for fiscal year 24 carryover, 3,111,000.
Okay, are you reviewing the,
I'm on the spreadsheet in the presentation. It doesn't have a page number.
okay,
Well, some of those dollars might have been encumbered already, because
Trying to
we
figure out
carry
is-
over the POs that go with that
Yeah,
carryover
what do
money.
we actually have in our impact fee fund right now?
It's not
ba-
much. Right, yeah. Helena, we're probably $1 million cash maybe in there that's not that's unencumbered potentially,
Okay,
but Helena can confirm that.
thank you. For the projects that we got grants for, do we already have our match funded?
Program the match in there for Waterfront Park. That's our next project that would have grant funding match.
Okay. So
That would be
for,
next fiscal year.
for the other projects that we have in this presentation, have we figured out a way to fund the current resident match, or proportion, I should say? And I ask that because, again, if we're going to contemplate a phasing and approach, is there any point in collecting impact fees that we, you know, shocking the system, so to speak, to collect impact fees that we may not be able to use for a few years? In other words, would it have been okay to collect those same impact fees at year 2 or year 3 rather than year 1 because we don't have our current resident match yet?
Well, so I'd say yes and no. For some of the near-term, smaller projects, the parking at Indian Trails, the lighting, the Y match, you know, those smaller dollar projects, yes, we've accounted for that coming from the Capital Projects Fund or from CRA, depending on, you know, where we can use those funds from. Well, the two big projects, like the sports complex, that's in there for big dollars, Long Creek, both of those are going to be a big, you know, match for the city. So, you know, building them up over the 7-year timetable is what we're projecting, at least on the rec impact fees, because if you wait to start collecting, you're just pushing the project further out in time. But to start saving for existing citizens, you know, again, this competes with the MOC. So, you know, It all depends which one you want to phase in first. Do you want, do you want to slow down the mock, completion implementation, or do you want to slow roll some of these projects? Is really the question, or find another funding source to pay for these.
Yeah, I think I look at this a little bit differently than traffic, because I think we heard from the traffic study, really other than State Route 100, which we arguably should not be paying for ourselves, FDOT should be paying for it, we're not seeing the need to expand right now. Whereas with parks, we see a need to take some action pretty darn soon. We know we need the aquatic center yesterday, according to our residents who have been asking for either upgrades or a new aquatic center for quite some time. We know we need to expand parking at ITSC. We know we need some lighting upgrades. We know we need more fields right now. So to me, there are some pretty serious park needs that we could really start to use impact fees for sooner rather than later. Whereas for traffic, I feel like we've got some time to build up the fund before the need becomes a little bit more immediate. And I don't want to be working from behind the curve, right? We want to be as proactive as possible, but also, again, keeping in mind the impact this will have on affordable housing. So that's just kind of my overall high-level thoughts on this specific study. I know our strategic action plan is coming up again, and I think this specific study is relevant to that, because for me, I really want to prioritize the why. I really want to prioritize the sports complex. I also kind of, in looking at track 17, if we have $8 million in this current study based on land acquisition, but we end up saying, hey, it would be better to use track 17 for that purpose, then you're changing the funding in this as well. I don't know if there's an appetite to consider that, but I think as we're talking about these things together, it's at least worthwhile to discuss. I don't think I had any questions other than the proportion question. Do we know what projects we are really looking to budget over the next, 3 years?
It would be Waterfront Park, Indian Trails, parking and lighting of the current baseball fields and the future courts, and the Y.
Fire station?
And the fire station conversion and additional parking at community center. Forgot
That's
about
another
that
one of mine. I really want to make sure that gets done, yeah.
There's
And
a
that
lot in
parking
there.
needs to get done quickly as well. I mean, we've been busting at the seams there for quite some time.
It's
Right.
been on City Council's strategic action plan list since 21, 22.
And are those that you
Sounds like
just,
the
thank you for
TPO.
that, City Manager, are those that you just listed, or have those been placed in the capital improvement plan budget to happen over the next handful of years?
Yeah, in the backup, we show projected years based on projected revenues coming in. So, it's hinged on those revenues matching what we're projecting.
Right, and going back to the strategy for the capital projects fund, if those revenues aren't matched up with our projections, then the park projects get slid further down the list and the priority is to the MOC.
Right. Okay. Any other questions or comments from the dais?
And, I know you guys earlier mentioned about the millage, and there was at one point in time a dedicated millage to capital projects that was in for a period of number of years, and it did, council did at that time take it away then during the downturn, when revenues really dropped. But there was a dedicated source to help with that existing citizen match, of a dedicated millage.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, so
Again,
I
Barb.
have some overall comments now that we've seen all three, but I don't know if you want to go out to public comment.
Yeah, I
first.
think let's go out to public comment on this specific one, and then we'll come back. Public comment?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Tony Amaral, Palm Coast resident. My concern of this is we need parks. I mean, we're known for parks. We've got green space. That's a selling feature for the city of Palm Coast. Our current level of service is at 10 roughly. Once we implement all this in the next 10 years, from what I'm seeing, 2035, what will be our level of service at that point if every project goes through? Just curious about that. We haven't been provided a report yet to back up all this, so we're still waiting for that, which would be nice to kind of be able to check numbers. The neighborhood parks, and this is why we're asking these things, neighborhood parks, do we own the land already? How many acres? What's going to be the level of service there? Are we talking about just swings? Are we talking about just green space? We have a number, but we don't have any other details. The skate park, we have no location yet. So the cost that is implemented, is that already including land? Or if we put it on another park and the land's already there, are we developing that land? Our sports complex, I gotta tell you, that was a surprise. Based on the location, we were told it'll be in vicinity of the proposed PPP that we're talking about in the westward expansion. So they'll be kind of competing for each other. Not to mention that just that level at 65 plus or minus 65 acres, will provide quite a bit of residents, just that park alone at the current level of service, not mentioning what we'll be at in the new one. And then the cultural arts facility, I just can't see a capacity increase in putting a cover over an existing structure, which is just, impact fees by law can only be used to increase capacity. Putting a cover, no additional parking, no additional anything, I'd be hard pressed to see where you're gaining capacity by adding a cover to that. And at the end of all this, we're increasing the cost of the houses. We're increasing our assessed values on those houses because it is based on cost per square foot. We are asking our citizens that are coming in, our residents, to pay the impact fee, to pay the extra ad valorem taxes, and we're shouldering all this, because I would love to hear what's going to be the cost per year to maintain these facilities. Can we have some numbers that kind of dictate, say, hey, we're estimating a bunch of stuff, but I've yet to hear anybody estimating how much is going to cost every citizen, not the new people. Well, they'll pay for it also, but every dollar, because Indian Trail sports complex, you got one field that's basically shut down on the regular. We don't have tournaments there anymore like we used to. We want to build 2 new sports complexes or add on. I just fear that we're going to have a bunch of dead grass and nothing there to justify it at the end. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You changed that beeping. It's very aggressive now. Anna Maria Long, Executive Officer, Flagler HBA. Tony covered most of the issues that I have, but just the overarching issue here, I believe, is that when you're looking at 3 impact fees together, claiming extraordinary circumstances, which I still disagree with on all of them, at this point in time, you need to look at your totality and see what do I want? What do you as council want for your citizens? What's most important? And in that, I think that it is important, the next important thing to do is to look at your time range on this, which you've all brought up during each discussion. In transportation, you've said, why are we going all the way out to 2050? What actually needs to get done in X amount of time? On parks, you've just said, in the next, I think, 3 years, maybe look at what needs to get done in the next 5 years. What are the actual plans? Here on the slide in front of us, it says your build out and looking at a population at 2035. We've been planning for build out for as long as I can remember, and we should have been at build out like 40 years ago now. Not really 40, probably 25 years ago. But the market always changes, something always happens. And I'm not a betting woman, but I don't think we'll be at build out at 2035 because something's going to change. Something's going to happen just like it has every other time before. So choose wisely on what you're going to put into, or what dollars you're going to put in. As Vice Mayor said, what you can actually match. Every time you collect an impact fee, it is a promise to the resident you're collecting it from. And if you can't keep that promise, you have to return the funds to them. That's the state law. So just keep all of that in mind and consider the housing affordability and that you would put yourself in a chokehold. And if you don't have the businesses and the people, then you're not gonna have the impact fees, and all this is for naught. So, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the dais. I did have some questions based on those comments, and Councilman Miller alluded to this earlier today. Have we looked at the ongoing costs, City Manager, of maintaining these new facilities? Because Parks and Rec comes out of the general fund. So the maintenance, the personnel, all of those things, general fund for the residents that are listening, that's tied to property taxes. So as we do bring new facilities online, or we expand current facilities to create more possible maintenance and personnel, have we looked at what that financial impact will be to our general fund obligations every year?
Yes, we are looking at some future costs and staffing expansions. In our Parks Master Plan, it also tells where operations and maintenance should be. We're actually under our level of service for parks maintenance staff. It's saying that we should have at least 9 more additional staff, and we don't. So how we're operating those facilities at the level of service now, we're doing very well. But for next year's fiscal year 26 parks cost, those are all already established facilities. So Waterfront Park is just expanding the shade covering. Indian Trails is just adding additional parking and lighting. So none of those are really increased in maintenance costs, although with the lights there will be some electrical costs. So not asking for additional staff in next year's budget, but just understand that we are under the level of service on our Parks Master Plan.
Then with regards to, and we had this conversation, City Manager, but if you could respond to the inquiry about the Cultural Arts Center and how that can be paid for in part by impact fees, or Carl, either one of you.
It's very similar to how we're using park impact fees for lighting and additional parking, because it's expanding capacity use of that facility. Anything else you want to add to that, Carl?
Yeah, it adds to the ability to use a facility more, and it would be, audio, lighting, and there'd be some site work tied to that as well, storage, those sorts of things. So it does add capacity to the facility in its use.
So for instance, lights allow you to use it at night.
Right.
Right, so you have more hours that users can use the park.
Correct.
So a cover allows you to use it during inclement weather
And at night.
and increase the overall capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And can I just answer the question based off level of service and park land? So yes, we do have, also in our Parks Master Plan, it has an inventory of all of those facilities. We do have land for all of the neighborhood parks that was either gifted through ITT or Flagler County. And when you look at the inventory of land and on the slide for level of service, that is, they're comparing acreage, but what's included in your plan here is actually building upon that land that already exists. So it's kind of not apples to apples.
Understood, thank you for that. Any other questions based on the public comment?
Did you want more clarification on the neighborhood park?
Sure.
We do have land for Quail Hollow on Belterre Boulevard. It's at the entrance just south of north of going into the Airport Commerce roadway. So that site's picked. We have several sites on the north end of the city for the Matanzas one. We don't know which site that would be on yet, but a neighborhood park would be less than what Ralph Carter Park is. What exactly elements go in there? We'd have
minus the lights?
Minus the lights. It would be an in-between park. It's more meant to be a neighborhood park. Existing actual program elements would be community outreach meetings and input, and those that would be factored in. There'd obviously be parking, restroom, playground, whether we have a basketball court or field space, and those sort of things will all get sorted out as we move forward. So we kind of took some dollars of developable land for a neighborhood park from the Park Rec Master Plan on what those dollars should be for development of that size acre site is how we came up with the dollars.
Yeah, and can I answer Ms. Long's point about total build-out? And it's a good reflection about the past previous impact fee studies that we've done for Parks and Recreation. And most recently, the last study showed an existing or future resident portion was at 70% and current resident portion was at 30%, roughly, those numbers, right? And since we've had this increase in population, now the future resident we're getting to about 50-50. So yes, we are getting closer to the total build out because that methodology is changing where it's more of the existing residents' burden to build out some of these future park facilities.
Yeah. And I will say, with regards to the paying for the overhead and the ongoing costs as these new facilities come online, in theory, your future residents would still be contributing largely to that because you've got new residents coming online, paying more taxes and things like that. It's the same concept as with utilities. We have new users that come online and then contribute to the overhead and the operational because they're now paying user fees. So same kind of concept. Your new people that are moving in are still going to be contributing to the ongoing operation once they're actually here, right? Obviously the impact fees are at the very beginning, but then you've got your end users and residents that are here and paying continuous property taxes into the general fund, which again then goes to fund the operation of these parks. Have we had in the last few years, we'll say the last 5 years, or well, let's just say since the last impact fee fund study, have we had any circumstances where we've had actual capital to build parks, but not enough impact fees?
Yeah, at Holland Park, when we did the rehab, one, it was an R&R project and capacity, so it was a split type funding project. That one, we didn't have the impact fees in there, so it was fully funded from Capital Projects Fund.
Yeah, let me just elaborate on that. When the previous city council wanted to move forward with construction of the community center and Holland Park, the first phase, they advance money from the capital projects fund or sales tax because the impact fee money did not keep up with meeting its share. They wanted to go ahead and build those facilities. There was the need, and so they advanced that money, and then the impact fee had to come back from some of those costs.
Okay, and so, but obviously it's done that at this point because now we've got over $1 million in the impact fee fund, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, I don't think Holland Park, it's programmed to be paid back this year if the revenue's there. If it's not at the end of the fiscal year, then we'll move into next year.
And those facilities were opened back in 2018, 2019. And so the dollars would have come back, would have been advanced in 2015, 2016, around there.
Okay, so it was quite a while ago, but still. Okay, any other questions?
And that's one point Murray was talking about is sometimes you have more impact fees, so you're paying for the bulk of the project impact fees, and then the citizen share, as long as the overall plan proportionate is correct, some projects are more, some are less, as long as the average is out to be correct is what we're looking for.
Sorry, I do have another question. What is the proposed timeline on our sports complex that's in this study?
I think I think we had land acquisition in the 5-year and then the development in the 6 to 10 year. We obviously want to do it quicker, it's just that the dollars aren't there.
Yeah, well, I guess, I mean, when I looked at this, and I've been a big proponent of adding fields, doing something to help our, many of our sports leagues, obviously, but I do look at this $19 million price tag for a sports complex when we know that there's a private entity in the county that's working on something that is of larger scale, but still would hit a lot of the needs that this is discussing. And I think it would go along kind of the same timeline. I mean, if this is looking at land acquisition in the next 5 years and then starting build out 6 to 10 years, that if you were to tell me, hey, we want land acquisition next 2 years and then we want to build by year 3, okay, I could see that, but
we push this further only because we're doing so many phases of the mock here in the next 5 years. We don't have the capital fund match to move forward on some of these park projects. And And the activity center is a completely different animal. Right now, you talked about dead sod at the sports fields because their fields are overused. We have too much demand and too little fields. And in the activity center, if they're talking about 50 tournaments a year, every weekend there's going to be tournaments there, and all our local clubs, our local teams, just our rec leagues, they have no place to play, no games, because the activity center is going to be booked out. So these are really for your local use, your practice. You can rotate field usage, because you don't want the activity center used 100% of the time either. You want to rotate those fields. So there's a need for both, because there's two different parameters and uses for those field types.
Well, if we're going to have that discussion then, and I don't disagree with you, but if that's the theory behind keeping this in the budget, then we shouldn't be talking about a PPP for the sports complex out west, because the theory there was, well, if we have a PPP, then we could garner public use out of that sports complex. But if we've got this and we're going to say, we're going to put tax dollars and impact fees into this sports complex, then let a private entity do whatever they want in the westward expansion. So I'm just having a hard time reconciling these two things, because it seems that we're saying two different things when it's convenient for us. And I don't know that you're wrong, but I want to make sure that we have the same vision here, and I don't know that the vision is clear. And when we're talking about tax dollars, and whether it's current residents or future residents, it's all money of theirs. I think we need to come down on the vision here. What's the vision?
Well, can I jump in? I've got some thoughts on that. I mean, first of all, it's $19 million. And Lauren, wasn't this sports complex discussed before the discussion of the westward expansion came along?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think this is a previous concept before the idea of the public-private partnership came along. And so, but it's where are we going to get $20 million from a very high impact fee? It is a need, and I'll be the first one to help sod the field myself, to get lights turned off at Ralph Carter so we can put the capacity out here. But yeah, I'm not letting it go. I drove by there the other night. And
Hey, I think I can get consensus for lights at Burroughs, though. That's my neighborhood.
I'll
so.
give you consensus to go out there and sod.
Neighborhood consensus.
Not afraid of work. But, okay, well, maybe we can move those lights, and
right.
you can enjoy the illumination till whatever time. But in any case, the big question is, where are you going to get the $19.1 million? And I think, Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, that was the question, right? Where are you going to come up with that kind of money? So, and the county's having a discussion. I think there's other discussions that we still need to have. I think we keep this as something that we understand is still a requirement. If we can move faster on it, if we find the money, if we figure it out, then let's do it. But let's also take a look at, let's see what the county does first. And if they're able to move in a timeline that's acceptable for us, then great. We don't have to spend $20 million. But overall, I just did some quick, beer math, back of the napkin math here on the overall fees that we discussed.
Can I stop you
Yeah.
for a second? Because I have a question then. Would council feel more comfortable, since Carl said that in the next 5 years, we're looking at land acquisition for the sports complex, and we know that that's around 8 million, I think you said 8.5, putting 8.5.
8.4.
8.4, thank you. 8.4 in this study, and then when the next impact fee study comes up, saying, okay, now we'll look for the other 12.5. Is that more appropriate?
So just for clarity on kind of the phased funding that we have in the plan, it's got 8.4 for, it looks like land acquisition, and then in FY29, and then FY30, 1.725 for design, and then it looks like the 31 through 35 block is kind of construction.
Yeah. So, you could even say 10 based on that, so acquisition and design, because by that time, your next impact fee study is going to come up. So I don't, I don't know how much it will change the numbers, but again, this is going to be another extraordinary circumstances argument. So are we properly including the right numbers that we need to be including in order to come up with that bottom line figure? So I don't know what you all think about that, reducing it down to either 8.4 or to whatever that land acquisition and the exact number for the design is.
But if we go down that road, are we signaling that we're not going to participate in the public-private partnership for the sports field?
No.
Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm not suggesting that, by committing to keeping this in the study, we're saying, oh, now we're not going to do the public. It's not even up to us. It's
Yeah,
the county
it's-
that has that in their court. So we don't even make a decision on that. But my point is, part of the argument in saying, oh, well, the benefit of this public-private partnership is that if we do it this way, the city can also then use the sports complex out west for public use. But if we're going to use our resident dollars for this sports complex, then why do we need that place out there for public use? Hey, look, I think that that complex will be great for tourism, to bring in tournaments, to bring in conferences, it'll bring in hotels, it'll be an anchor for so many other things that will bring in a lot of economic dollars. No argument from me there. The question is, do we use our tax dollars to help fund it? And I don't think the answer to that is yes, if we're going to use tax dollars for this sports complex. But I don't know, because I don't know what the county is thinking or doing.
I think it's two different conversations. I think, and to your point about, I view that really as an economic development
Correct,
project,
yeah.
not a let's build a park, because it's not ours. And honestly, we lost all say in how that's going to run when we didn't get the bond amendment through.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't enter in those partnerships. So it's not in our court, so to speak.
Yeah,
going
that
forward.
ball's in the county's court
Right.
at this point.
Again, this has always been a need, and I don't think, this specific project may not even cover our shortfalls. To say that the point is that potentially both of these things help get us to where we actually need to be. Some participation in the private, in terms of usage during the week when they're not doing their revenue model, kind of, the tournament thing. But then our own helps fill all those other gaps and gets, teams off of fields that are in the middle of neighborhoods and things like that. So I think there's probably many different things we need to do to fill the gap in terms of sports fields and complexes.
Yeah.
I don't think there's just like a one project and we've got it all solved.
And that's if we decide on a rate that they recommend, right? That the teams recommended here. I'm ready to go to the next
ahead.
discussion, because, if we look at the Parks and Rec difference in funding, so if you look at the overall, so Parks and Rec, fire, which we all agreed that we're going to move forward with 97.7%. And if we were just to do the transportation piece with residential impact fees, which I think we say we're going to put the commercial aside for now, we're looking at a $7,000 difference per single-family residential unit. Okay, it's going from about $5,700 to $12,774. And I just used the numbers that were on the bar charts that you guys provided. And if I'm wrong, jump in, but this is how I'm seeing it. It's about a $7,000 jump overall from all three. Do we want to fund the impact fee for residential at 137%? Do we want to fund Parks and Recreation at 98%? Because I think those are the big strategic questions. Like, for example, if we did the transportation residential piece at 62%, so let's say 50% increase with 3% over the next 4 years, gives us 62%, whatever. That puts us at $7,919 versus $12,000. So overall, where do we want to adjust the levers to make the proposed increases, which we need, and the data shows it, but where it's reasonable? I don't know if having everything maxed out at all the percentage rates is reasonable on these impact fees. And if it's not reasonable for Parks and Rec, then, which projects are we doing? I mean, we've all agreed that the YMCA the community center expansion, I mean, the waterfront park, I mean, my unfiltered cigar club alone fills the parking lot there when we gather. The Indian Trails expansion, okay, that we need, and having a field to rotate that at least, you know, allow some grass to grow on one of them. I think that's kind of the bigger discussion that will help us make a decision on an overall sports complex that we all need. So I just did some quick numbers, but we're talking about a $7,000 increase in impact fees. And you know, I've recently bought property and had to put 20% down, and you know, on new construction, whatever the case may be, and you know, I'm fortunate enough that I'm able to do that, but if it's my kids, no way. You know, and so it's you know, I think this is where we're at. I think we all agree that fire, public safety is our number one mandate, right? So 97.7%. The 137% on the transportation piece, we know that our roads need improving, but is 137 the right number? And then I don't think 98% on parks is right. Not, I mean, maybe over time, and I mean, some of these projects are just, they're $19 million projects. I know we need a skate park. We're just going through this. But the ones that are in our legislative priorities and our strategic action plans are the things that are right in front of us that I think we could fund, maybe at a lower rate, we could still cover the cost.
Keep in mind though, Councilman Gambaro, so you have to look at it, because you know, I looked at the phased approach, right? But for every home, let's say we cut everything in half right now for the first 2 years, because I was kind of thinking, oh, what if we collect 50% for years 1 and 2, and then we tag on the rest for year 3 and out. And that's just one scenario I played with. But during year 1 and year 2, for every home that pays the discounted impact fee, those are monies that we're not collecting, that other 50%. But in addition to that, more homes are coming. You're messing with that percentage of, you're increasing what the current residents are going to be paying eventually versus what future residents are going to be paying. So not only are you collecting less up front, you're also increasing what your current residents will be paying as we have more capacity. So it's just something to keep in mind as we really look at the payment plan we come up with. Because I have the same concerns you do, but just want to make sure that consideration is out there as we make this decision.
I also wanted to mention that in making sure that the potential additional funding is accurate that I've mentioned on each of these, it should impact the calculated rate on the transportation at least in some ways. So there's already, based on that direction, there's already a little bit of movement in these. So, and I agree, I added it up to it, $7,009 and
Right,
48 cents.
That's right.
So it's a huge impact, but some of that's already shifted a little bit. And then we can, I think what we'll get back, my assumption is what we'll get back is, based on that direction, we'll get some new numbers here that may affect how we want to look at it as a percentage versus the original number, because some of it has slightly changed. And the transportation portion is really the driver here of most of this cost. So I think handling that in the right way is really what's going to get us in the sweet spot in terms of maintaining economic growth and things like that, economic development, not shocking the system, not causing unaffordable housing, all those things. So yeah, I'm willing to work and try to figure out the right spot here.
Yeah, and for me, the priority work is, you know, fire, roads, and then parks and recreation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, when we talk about all the things that we need to fix with our infrastructure, the very first thing was the utility, right, in terms of funding. That's done. The next thing is roads, right? That's the, I think, the gap there. So it is a high priority. You know, we need to make sure that we can also match that funding appropriately to get, because it's a lot of money that we're going to have to put into it. So, yeah, it's a big deal and it's important. but we also have to take everything into account, I guess, so that we're not, tipping things out of proportion.
Yeah, and again, so $7,000, that's just single-family residential, not multifamily, not the other pass-throughs we've got coming through, I mean.
Currently, I think the totals are somewhere around $20,000 for all total impact fees when a new home comes online. So you're basically shifting that from 20 to like 27 now, which is a pretty large increase.
So that's where I'm at. I just think, what's the right answer? I don't know if 100, all the recommended points are the right answer. I think it's probably somewhere in between, but from my perspective, yeah, I think you're right, Ty. I think tackling the transportation piece will be the big piece, but I don't think we need to be at 98% on Parks and Recreation. I think we can cover the YMCA, the waterfront park, Indian Trails, and even, finding funding for Fire Station 22.
So what is your proposed, we can't just say, we don't think we're at 98%. What would be your proposed alternative?
So what's the requirement cost for the YMCA, the community center, the expansion of waterfront park, Indian Trails? What's that dollar look like? And set the percentage accordingly.
So can I just
And impact fees.
help just a little bit here? Is that a lot of these project costs are based off future facilities that are not, it's not what you're talking about right now. Carl's already told you that we have the funding match for the fire station, the Y, and all of those within the next 3 years, right? But a lot of these projects, to get to your big total number, is where we need direction on. Do you want us to save money for these future facilities? You're really not making a current decision. You're making a decision for saving money 10 years down the road, right? So do you want us to take projects out that you don't believe in philosophy-wise, right? Or a duplication of efforts, right? Do we need to have money in for a Y and an aquatic center for our residents? Do we need to have money for a cultural arts facility, or will that be provided by somebody else? Or I'm just throwing out ideas that have the big dollar value in the future long range. Do you see that as a city service, right? Because you're saving money in these fees based off of a plan, a parks master plan, that your residents support, but do you support them being as city services that you're saving these monies for in the long range? You're not talking about anything current. Is that helpful?
Yeah, and thank you, City Manager. I think that for me, that's my concern, is if we say, okay, well, we're only going to include in the study these 4 or 5 projects that we see as coming online or starting to come online in the next 5 years, then after 5 years, we're left with 0 potentially and likely in the bank account to start to save for some of these larger projects. And one of the reasons, I think a very large reason people move to Palm Coast is for the quality of life, and a huge part of that are our parks. So this is a staple for the city of Palm Coast that right now with this decision, and as we finalize our ordinance, we are putting at risk if we don't make sure it's funded correctly. Now, I am a big proponent of making sure that the numbers are right, which is why I'm harping so much on whether or not we need to include the full 20 million for this sports complex in these specific numbers. And any other numbers that anybody thinks, hey, this might not be right, or this seems off, nothing else jumped out at me. But I think we do need to save for these parks.
Yeah, I was going to say, the sports complex to me on this Parks and Recs is the key. Have we decided that whether or not there's a westward expansion commercial sports complex or not, we still need the sports complex $19 million one that we're talking about here? Have we made that decision that either way, we still need the city sports complex addition?
I think that's what we were talking about, yes, yeah,
Is that true? I don't necessarily agree with that.
yeah.
So, I mean, that's, to me, that's the big chunk of money that might affect what we do.
I think there's a couple things that go into that conversation. So one, if it's, to the point that we're not involved in that PPP, but we could be potentially a future user / tenant.
Yeah, the people.
Us, the city.
The people who use the stuff.
Well, we would have to.
Don't worry about it.
We would have to pay them essentially to allow our public
Fees,
to
they
use
would
their
charge
fields,
fees.
right? And so that would be the only potential relationship that we have with them forward, but we'd be paying for it one way or another. So if we're paying for that,
Well,
but we
maybe
can't
the
use it on the
people-
weekends, which is when, all the games really occur for the most part, then where are we going to source those fields on the weekends when they're using the fields for these travel tournaments and things like that? So I feel like there is a need regardless for expanding our capacity because we know that we're very short in it. To what extent we want to pay for that, whether it's $20 million or piecemealing it or whatever, I don't know what that answer is, but I would say that we definitely need more of our own
We need to
fields.
just pause on that right now, leave that out right now until we have a little better idea of what's going to happen.
Well, that was why my suggestion was
Yeah,
to maybe
to
cut
move
that
it
in half.
backwards, yeah.
Because we know that in accordance with what staff has presented to us, we really only, in the next 5 years, we need about 10 million. We don't need the full 19. So do we scale that back, kind of like we did with traffic? We scaled some things back. And is there anything else, looking at it that way, that we can say, hey, a portion of this we won't need potentially until 31 or 35 to be a little bit more concrete with what we would need now. I only see fiscal year 25 and into the future, and I get the point of saving. I also want to save, but I want to be reasonable with the numbers that we're looking at as well.
I get it, but I'm going to go back to what you said, and I'm not advocating either way, just trying to help you guys get through the discussion, because I know it's really difficult. I'm just going to go back to what you said, Ms. Pontieri, is that in the future, if you reduce those expenditures now, then the current residents are going to have more of a burden for the other side of those costs by the time we get to the next recreation impact fee study 5 years down the road. The methodology will change because more people have moved here and the build out is getting closer.
State will have restricted it more.
Just if I can
all those things.
add to the clarification. So if we take the sports complex and we move 10 million of it beyond the 10 years, it won't drop the fee because the fee looks at the ultimate build out of the park. So you'd have to eliminate it completely out of the plan to reduce the fee.
That's why I said, are there projects in here that you don't see us having anything to do with a city providing that service in the future? A project, a specific thing that we can
I
take
want all
out?
the projects,
I do
Yeah,
too.
I can't
just
help you.
need money for them. I mean, to me, there's not something that's out of character for, what we provide in here, so it's not like, this just doesn't jive with our culture. Easy to cut.
If we price out our houses to where people are not going to move here, I mean, we've looked at a lot of projections. We're not going to have the money anyways. We just got to be careful.
Oh, I agree. I think we're looking at that right now, trying to work to that goal that, what can we remove in order to make this not such a huge impact?
And we don't have to make that decision now. I think we can think about it. We've got a couple more reads and we can continue the discussion.
Well, no, we need to at least we need to give direction because we've got a first reading. We can make tweaks, but I don't think that we can say this isn't our current proposal. We need to give something.
How's this going to be? I didn't look through the ordinance examples here, but is it just a number, a dollar amount that we're setting?
Well, I'd be personally
could
interested
change a
in,
lot.
if we took the sports complex out totally, well, how would that, what would the impact fee be then if we did that? What would the impact, what would be the impact on the impact fee if we took the sports complex out?
I think you need to probably look at several of those projects to make a big dent in.
Big one, this one.
Well, there's other ones because what you're looking at is really the future projects, right? So whether that's,
You got like 200 million, I think, in future projects. So you take
Yeah.
out 20 million, 10% maybe. Right?
I can tell you, I won't be on board with that. I mean, I've been a really big advocate for these leagues and these teams, and, I mean, really, truly, we're losing a lot of, sports tourism money now because of these guys not
School
being able to attend.
population has not gone up.
No, it's around 13.
Going down.
Yeah.
Well,
No, a lot of more people are choosing, homebound
yeah.
and,
10 years, the
and
school
charter
population has
schools and
not
things
gone
like
up, and-
that.
And no matter, I've been on that board, and the latest numbers was 500 down,
What's the number now? Because it was like 13,000 when I sat on the
under
school board.
13,000.
Yeah, but we still have a current need, even if, I mean, yeah, kids are still going to continue to age, obviously, but right now, we still have a need for fields. It's not like we're projecting a future need. We have a need now for fields, and we have for at least a few years.
so why don't I make this recommendation to you? Because you seem pretty deadlocked. So what if we kind of let the parks team go? You hear from economic development and some of Craig's thoughts, and then we come back and have another impact fee direction. That way we can get through economic development, because I know you're kind of hinging your decisions based off that presentation. So maybe hearing that presentation and you guys be able to work through it, then we might be able to get somewhere with the direction on impact fees.
Well, to that point, city manager, I would say we need to go through SAP as well then.
Okay.
Because SAP is going to, I think, more clearly define what our actual priorities are, which could then have a direct effect on this discussion.
Happy to proceed that way as well.
You guys okay with
let's do
that? Okay, all right. Thank you, Steph. So then we will move on to presentations, item E4, economic development updates. I'm comfortable. Somebody else is fine.
Gotta get blood in my legs.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council, Jason DiLorenzo, Chief of Staff, and Craig McKinney, Economic Development Manager. Craig's pulling up his presentation here. Okay.
All right. Good afternoon, City Council. Craig McKinney, and always a pleasure to connect with you and talk about some economic development. Today's agenda, we're going to do a quick run through a recap of where we left off last time and some recent updates, and then we're going to really drill into incentives, leads, and next steps. And although we have these last three bullet points kind of separated, I think we're going to see that they are components of a much larger conversation. So quick recap of where we left off last time. Coming into this role, my three pillars were sites and buildings, workforce development, and collaboration, with sites and buildings really being that primary need that we got to get to put us at that next level. The updates from last year, of course, the target industry feasibility study. The website has been an ongoing process, which we're going to touch on again in just a second. Amplifying our social media, specifically to LinkedIn. Starting the first business retention and expansion program, and hosting the first workforce development roundtable. Recent updates. As I mentioned, the website is always a continuous process. Roughly a month, maybe 2 months ago, we relaunched the homepage. This was a great collaboration between my team and about 4 folks in IT. We made just a fantastic improvement to the homepage, and now we're going back through a second run through all the ancillary pages as well. Last month, we had our first ad as a city in Site Selection magazine. Again, this was a collaboration between my office and communications and marketing. Very happy with the way that it turned out. And I believe that some of you on the dais are already familiar with Site Selection magazine as really being that premier publication for site selection consultants. So again, we're really happy with both the collaboration and the output on that. Most of you know, City of Palm Coast has started to engage for the first time in trade shows as an exhibitor. So starting in January, we've been to Spacecom in Orlando, Satellite 2025 in DC, MRO Americas in Atlanta, and 2 weeks ago, I also attended the Florida Economic Development Council Annual Conference, which in itself was not a trade show, but obviously an example of a conference and some time well spent. As we've continued on, again, the Business Retention and Expansion Program, much like the website, always an ongoing process, but a couple of highlights recently in the first 5 months of the year. We've had 2 outstanding meetings with local employers where we brought in both CareerSource and Daytona State College. The first was at Alema, which is a high-tech manufacturer of medical wire with about 150 positions, and they are a subsidiary of a large European global conglomerate. And we had a second meeting at Ground Up Motors as well. The purpose of these meetings is where really business retention and expansion and workforce development overlap. On the business retention and expansion side, we're really trying to reach out to our existing investors, the folks that are out there creating good paying jobs in the city, and let them know that the city is here as a partner for them whenever they need us, and that we're certainly happy to support. On the workforce development side, especially in the context of the Alema meeting, which is really kind of a textbook meeting of how we want things to go. On one hand, we're bringing in CareerSource, who's coming in with grant funding to hire new employees with about a 2 or 3 week turnaround on those reimbursement funds. And then we're bringing in the Vice President of Workforce Development from Daytona State College, who is one, bringing in ideas, but 2, we're making that connection between Daytona State and a local employer and creating that funnel for a company that's hiring for about 25 positions right now. And when we make that connection, and then Daytona State leaves Alema and they're very impressed, well, then they go back to their campus and they start funneling those graduates to Alema. We also did another first, the email campaign for Town Center. This was a design that we did in-house, sent to 442 targeted commercial brokers. And when I say targeted, that means that my team went and we scraped that contact information personally. Very successful open rate on that, 36.5%. And our goal primarily is to do this quarterly, but a little bit more importantly, we're going to really try to tie it to sending it out when there's something worthwhile, a big announcement, to really create that headline and get those brokers to click a second time. Speaking of Town Center, recently we hosted a promenade event. This was an event hosted by Persimmon Capital that we did here in the community wing. That was on April 29th. The primary audience was local commercial business owners, brokers, and healthcare professionals. Very successful event, I think, by all who attended. And after the event, attendees had the option to do a walkthrough of the Promenade project. Transitioning on to incentives.
Craig, can I stop you for a
Yes,
second?
ma'am.
So I definitely think that Town Center and the Promenade needs to be marketed, pushed, et cetera. But this is privately owned, right?
Yes. They reached out to us, and we were happy to kind of
To
have
give
a
them free
space for them.
advertisement? I would guess so.
Oh, no.
So my question was, how are we working with the private owners to help them market their property rather than us just doing this? Because we don't do this for everybody, obviously.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We would be happy to help anyone expand their business for sure. The owners of the Promenade reached out to us. They asked if we would have a room available for them to host this so then they could walk the folks over to the project. We also worked with invitation list, local invitation list, restaurateurs and bankers and some medical professionals as well. I think there's some representatives from Advent were here as well. But they have a whole marketing team up in Jacksonville that did the invitations and all the primary work, did all the planning. We just were organizing it on the local side here.
Okay, and then what about the email blast? Because I'm looking at this as obviously staff time and things like that, and we should not be doing this for private companies. I mean, like I said, I understand wanting to help with the economic development side of things, but there's a line. So I'm just curious, you know, what have we put into this? What's the future for this look like? And what has that relationship been with this private landowner?
It's actually a SAP priority to market the town center. So we were just working off of that priority, but it was generic, right?
It was generic. So while the Promenade event, right, obviously, we worked with Persimmon Capital and their broker. The email blast, there was no interaction with any companies, landowners, and it was just a way for my office to try to catalyze some additional growth in town center, especially as we transition it through the presentation, it being one of the few land assets that we have, but we'll touch on that in a few minutes as we continue through the slide deck.
In the email blast, who does it say to contact? I see it down here. It says to contact you. So that's why I'm just.
Yep, so we did that. So that was just kind of a audible call. That was an attempt for us to get some kind of gauge of the response in addition to the open rate. But certainly, you know, any broker is going to be able to look at the site and see, you know, who the listing broker is if they saw a property in that email blast that interested them.
So I guess my position on this is the Chamber of Commerce's job. This is not the City of Palm Coast's job. We have a chamber to do these types of things. So, you know, Craig, you're a one-man shop for the most part. And I mean, our economic development team has been rather small, at least since I've been on council. So I definitely value your time. I know that everybody up here values your time. And so I just want to make sure we're not doing what other entities and other groups should be doing, because truly I look at this as something that our chamber should be doing. So I think we just need to be really careful. I agree, town center is a huge asset. It's something we've been trying to really feed into for a while. But maybe let's reach out to the chamber and say, hey, it's time, you know, they've broken ground on the promenade. It's time for you guys to do what the chamber does and pick this up and carry this forward. Because Craig McKinney for the City of Palm Coast should not be fielding calls from brokers for the promenade at Town Center, not in my opinion. I mean, to me, I have an issue with that when the taxpayers are paying your salary. So I agree that we need to, you know, do what we can for business owners in the community, but there's got to be a line. So I don't know what the rest of council's kind of thoughts on that are, but this just struck me as just going a little far.
Sure, and you know, just to clarify one thing that you just said there at the tail end, right? I'm not quite sure when we did it as seeing it as helping out business owners. I think it was a means or a way to stimulate investment and not help existing business owners, but to create CapEx in town center.
But where's that line? You know, where's the line? So I think we just need to relook at this maybe for future campaigns, maybe have at the very least, a different contact down here, maybe put somebody who, I don't know who the contact would be to either rent or buy out of this space, but something to put the onus on somebody else other than your shoulders.
Sure.
Our job is town center in its entirety as opposed to specific units in town center.
Right, yeah. I mean, this looks like it would come from a brokerage, to be honest with you. So.
I agree to the extent that there's two ways to look at it, right? We have like strategic areas, right? So this and say the employment center out west, whenever that comes around, and things like that we're going to be marketing, you know, the industrial sites that we have off of Hargrove and things like that. Like, hey, somebody owns it, someone's going to stand to make some money by selling it to somebody else, but we're also investing to try to get some of this tax money and jobs and things like that. So it all comes into play, and I guess to the point, I agree that there is a line somewhere. I'm not sure where that is.
Yeah.
And so it's just whether we're willing to do more and invest more, or whether we think there's a point when we shouldn't be doing that. I don't know what's right. I'm not particularly, put off by this, but I could understand your thought process with it as well. So, I'm comfortable going either way with it.
I think we've just been saying at least I have been hearing and I have been feeling that our chamber should be doing this type of thing. And so I really think that we need to get the Chamber of Commerce more involved. And even if you reach out to the chamber and say, hey, we've got this awesome email blast going out, who with the chamber can we have these people contact to then help facilitate this relationship? That is literally their job. So I would just say maybe we pull the Chamber of Commerce into this and get them more involved so that the city of Palm Coast isn't spearheading the full lift of this. That's just my suggestion.
So I have a couple thoughts. I think these gentlemen are operating off the last orders given, right? So that's what good troops do, all right? Secondly, I don't know what it is we have to do as a council and as a community, but whatever the heck it is we're doing, some of this, it's not working. We don't have commercial business just busting down our doors. Mm-hmm. So I agree that, continued and enhanced partnership with the chambers is important. The town center, CDD, whoever, we need to, but let's not put up barriers so that we're not innovative and trying to reach the goals that we all share. And that's my only concern going forward. So,
just to be clear, this is just an update of one thing that we've done in the past 6 months in terms of being a driver of what my personal or professional goals are, or how that time is spent. I wouldn't stay on this slide too long. It was something that we were happy to do. But again, this is just a single update of one thing that we've done over the past 6 months and not all we've done the past 6 months.
No, I know. And I don't mean to make it seem that way. And I don't mean to, we can move on. I don't want to harp on this anymore. But I think my frustration comes I've continuously said from this seat, where's the chamber at? What's the chamber doing to help this along? And I've continued to feel like we are doing the job that the chamber should be doing. So I think the chamber needs to get more involved and take off of your shoulders these types of things. So maybe just get them in, pick up the phone, get them involved, and have them do a lot of this with our landowners.
Yes, ma'am. All right, moving on. Jumping to incentives. So incentives have come up a couple times over the past, say, month from the dais, including today. So we thought it would be a good time to, one, look at the city's current incentive package, two, look at what companies are looking for in incentives today, and three, not as recommendations, but just as conversation starters and getting direction from City Council on what potential expansion of those incentives might look like. So the current incentive that the city offers right now is the Recapture Enhanced Value Grant. And essentially, after a company pays its property taxes to the city, well, first of all, obviously, there's an agreement, right, between the city and the company, and then and that is for X number of years, and to return a X percentage of that company's property taxes that they paid to the city. So as a company moves through the agreement and they pay their property taxes annually, the city then cuts a check back to the company for that predetermined, agreed upon amount as it moves through the years of the agreement. And the main thing with the Rev Grant is that once a company receives that percentage of its property taxes back, the company is required to use that money in several ways that are up to the company. One would be reinvesting it in their facility. Another would be hosting a regional event, supporting the Flagler County schools, particularly in STEM and career and technical education programs, supporting and promoting safety programs, or sponsoring a city event. So that is the current incentive package that the city has right now. And there's one company under that agreement right now, which is Ground Up Motors.
How long have we had this program?
2019,
And how many companies have taken advantage of it?
one. There was almost a second one. All the framework was in place. Was an existing company that was going to move the remainder of their business from California to here. And we ran into COVID and, yeah.
Is there something in particular that we can attribute the lack of utilization of this program to?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, and we're gonna get to that. It's gonna be sites and buildings as far as a spoiler alert goes. So when we, moving on from the Rev Grant, right, we gotta talk about incentives, right, and what companies are looking for right now. And the name of the game, since COVID, and since there's been such a huge spike in manufacturing investments in the United States over the past 5 years, a lot of the premium sites have been picked off. And right now, companies are looking for speed to market. They're looking particularly, in most cases, for buildings that are ready to go. For me personally, in my vernacular, when I say sites and buildings, I also mean that infrastructure, right? That power and that water going up to the building. And if they're not looking for a building, if we're talking about just a pad-ready site, they're certainly looking for utilities going up to that site, and not something that's going to take 2 years and X amount of money for utility to extend service to that site. Companies are also looking for immediate capital relief. One stat that I heard from the Florida Economic Development Council conference, from some site selection consultants that were on a panel, is that the margin of error with companies as they forecast costs for investment can be as high as 60%. So companies are looking for speed to market, and they're looking for capital relief when they're looking for incentives. Additionally, they are looking for fast-track permitting, which doesn't require, obviously, any specific monies on the city's part, but it does mean that, we have to have a permitting process that really walks the talk. And, if we advertise fast-track permitting, we need to make sure that we're turning that around, and if there's any issues with that paperwork, that the company knows immediately and really get it back in their court.
Can you expand on what you mean by fast-track permitting, Craig? Because that's one of the largest complaints I hear. It takes forever to get anything permitted in the city from the business community, and not people here local, but for people that are interested in coming in. What does that mean? You're talking not like 4 Commerce Drive, but you're talking a new facility, correct?
Yes, or in more cases than not, yes, sir.
Okay. So all the traditional permits that have to be done in order to get a certificate of occupancy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we have the capacity to move fast?
Yes. And part of a larger conversation, just a little bit of pushback, that we're pretty quick, and I can show you the data.
Okay.
But what Craig is talking about is you go to the front of the line, and you get your hand held from start to finish.
Okay. That's answering my question.
And so we would have kind of like qualified criteria for that, right? Like if you're bringing X amount of dollars here, we're going to prioritize you, right?
Yes, correct. And Craig's going to talk about some criteria here.
Okay, thank you.
So right now, just as we move off the slide, companies are looking for site and building availability, speed to market, infrastructure, and immediate capital relief. So I think the conversation from here transitions, what does the city want to do as far as potential incentives go? One, and I think probably our first option, but of course that's up to council, would be to take that REV grant and essentially keep it the same, where a company who is considering locations, either in Florida or in other states, and Palm Coast has made that short list, based on their CapEx, the number of jobs, and the wages of those jobs, right? The city enters into agreement with the company to essentially refund, right, a portion of their property tax for X amount of years. And I think our first steps that if we're wanting to enhance our incentives as a way to attract companies here, well, the first thing we would probably want to do is drop that requirement to reinvest into the community. It makes sense for the city, right? It's great to have those dollars circulating back into either the facility itself or through other programs in the city. But, really, a company is looking, if they get an incentive, they want to do, what they want to with the money. And certainly their presence here, their investment here is already causing, a certain amount of capital to circulate through the city. So I would say, if we want to look at enhancing our incentives, one, let's take it step by step and not go too fast. And I think this is a great first step for us. Impact fees, right? We talked about that a lot today. If we're looking to even go to a next level for creating and promoting incentives, we can look at impact fee contributions. The numbers that we're going to look at over the next couple slides are not recommendations, they're just placeholders for us to walk through some examples. So for impact fee contributions, one thing that we could consider, again, these numbers being placeholders, are eligible businesses may receive a contribution from the city of up to 75% of their city levied impact fees. The specific impact fees that would be eligible include the transportation impact fee and the fire and rescue system impact fee. Much like what we were on a previous slide, this would be a tier-based format based on CapEx, number of employees, and wages. And obviously it would be a formal process where there's a pre-application meeting, a formal application with staff review, and a recommendation to council. We talked about tiers with the impact fee contribution. Again, specifically these numbers are placeholders. A tier 1 could be up to 50% of an eligible city impact fee. And as placeholders, we could look at something as 15 new full-time jobs with a wage that is at least 110% of the most recently published average annual wage for the county, and a CapEx in this example of $2 million. And then if we look at a tier 2 credit, that would be up to 75%, then those jobs, the wages, and the CapEx would need to be increased to the examples that we see here to meet that 75% contribution.
Craig, can I stop? You have a couple questions
Sure.
here. So I like the concept of this overall, but I'm curious as to whether or not we should flip the 50% and the 75%, and here's why. I feel like any company that can afford 30 new full-time employees and a $5 million investment doesn't need a 75% impact fee credit. They may not even need a 50% impact fee credit. I look to you for how appealable that is for companies, okay? Because like, for instance, I'm thinking in my mind, Walmart. Does Walmart need impact fee credits? Probably not. I wouldn't imagine Walmart needs impact fee credits. But does Walmart look for impact fee credits in the places that they go? Do they care more about rooftops? I don't know.
Well, great question. A couple things there, right? A lot to add to that. One, if we talk about big box retail, right, are they going to meet that 125% of the wage, right, to even qualify?
Sure.
Two, it's staff review, right, with a recommendation to council. So I don't think that all of us as a group would be really high on the list for incentivizing a project like that. And two, and we're going to touch on this in a minute, but it's a great time for you to bring it up. When we talk about incentives, right, we don't need to lead with incentives when it comes to what we promote in our economic development as a city. We have some fantastic assets that already put us, in my mind, in play, with the exception of us not having sites and buildings. But, you know, we have the East Coast busiest interstate cutting right through the center of us. We've got a high quality of life with the parks and trails and the ocean. We're surrounded by a fantastic network of higher education partners, which creates a workforce funnel. And we're in the northeast part of the state and not the southwest part. So we are closer to the rest of the country. And so with that, you know, when we talk about incentives, you know, in my professional experience, we don't want to lead with that. And incentives, whether it's a community or a company, should really come into play after they've shortlisted 2 or 3 cities, right? And then if all things are equal with those sites, then, you know, cities should start, or pardon me, a company should start looking at incentivizing or looking at incentives as a difference maker.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I feel like we may be leaving out I don't want to call it mom and pop, but maybe we'll use Firehouse as an example. I think we've used Firehouse as an example from this dais before. We've got 2 in the city now. What if a third one wants to go open up on 100, for instance, or US 1, for instance? Are they going to meet all of this criteria? And probably not, but they're the type that might actually need the incentives.
Well, again, we'll always operate at the direction of council. But, you know, certainly one thing that I would be looking to do if we were to move forward with any of these potential ideas is, you know, any project that is incentivized should be in one of our targeted industries.
Okay.
Yeah, and I want to draw a differentiation here between, I want to call it welfare, right, for business or something like that. But to me, the goal is to get companies that so far have been listing us as 2 or 3 on their short list instead of 1, to get those companies to finally pull the trigger on us, right, and build a tax base and those things. And while developing small businesses is important, I don't think this is what that is, right? I think those are 2 different things, really. And so trying to attract those, you know, space adjacent industries or precision manufacturing or arms, you know, things like that, those are different beasts than kind of like our mom and pop or small businesses or things like that. I think we can do both, but separately.
Well, the problem that I'm having is I need to know how successful this actually is in other places because we have to budget for this money.
No, understood.
So, I mean,
yeah.
if we budget $2 million, but what we're trying to attract doesn't really care so much about these types of incentives because they have the financial means where this isn't that deal breaker, then we're setting aside money that we could be using elsewhere.
Well, I mean, like Amazon, right? One of the largest companies in the world still routinely leverages incentives to build manufacturing plants and distribution centers and things like that.
If that's the case, then great, let's do it. That's what I'm looking for. I don't know.
All of those dollars add up to these companies, and it's just a number, and they're just doing math, right? So, you know, any million, $1, you know, if they get $1 million here or $1 million there, that's $1 million, you know. For as a percentage of their budget, it's small, but overall, it's still a lot of money. So they look for it.
So Craig, when I look at this, so as a businessman, right, if I wanted to move into an existing facility, any incentive that I would get if I met the criteria would be within ad valorem taxes, not impact fees, right? Because I'm just moving into a new building, even if I buy it.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. So
Right, because once the impact is paid, then there's not it doesn't get paid again.
All right. And we have some warehousing here that is up for sale that people could move into, kind of pad ready, if you would, if they chose to do that. But that's a significant investment. So so that's one. I think the vice mayor asked a good question on, you know, where else have they been doing? I've used this example before about, you know, Brevard County with Cocoa Beach, Melbourne, and all the different gun manufacturing, Caltech, Live Free Armory, Diamondback, I mean, I can go down the list. But they have kind of an incubator, and these are guys that are not putting together, upper and lower receivers that they buy off of, open market. They're machining this stuff, precision stuff that Councilmember Miller just talked about. What are they doing that's working? What are they doing? Is it the incentives? Is it the space that they're offering? I think that would be a great place to benchmark, to see what works. If you guys, with consent of the rest of the council, I think that might be a good place because it's been within the last 10, 15 years, and it's continuing to grow. And they're providing arms all over the world, to include the Ukrainians, right? Because they're firing their weapons and their barrels are melting, and because they're getting stuff from elsewhere. But good American-made quality products that are providing manufacturing jobs, good paying manufacturing jobs, I think would be worth benchmarking.
Vice Mayor, if I may. Councilman, we'll look at those other communities and see what they're doing.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to go back to your question about flipping the incentive. But we're going to look at it because I think what you're saying is really interesting. We've landed nothing, basically, right, or very little, right? So honing in on maybe that smaller operation, right, hitting a bunch of singles, okay, instead of hitting a home run like we were trying to do with the airline manufacturing. Maybe that helps. So we're definitely gonna look at that and see if there's
Small ball.
yeah.
I think
little bit
there
small ball.
can be two versions.
I don't want to get in the
this,
middle
right?
of the sports report here, but
But that's later. Yeah, no, I think there can be two versions of this, so to speak. The problem with, obviously, more attainable singles, right? But we need 200 of them instead of, 5 whales or whatever. And we got to do both. I think that's the winning recipe, is try to get some big manufacturers here, but also continue to just wear away at, adding some of the small guys as well. So it all adds up over time.
In Japan, they call it just-in-time supply
Yeah.
system. You got a big manufacturer, but they have a whole bunch of little people who, every day, provide parts for the bigger company
Yeah,
and things
yeah.
like that. So those are examples of, but it's called, just-in-time supply, that kind of thing. So I don't know if we have much of that in the United States or not.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
it's a lot of Japanese business strategies have been incorporated into the U.S. Strategy. They were crushing it in the 90s and caused everybody to kind of look up and see what they were doing, because they were doing everything really well, especially their vehicle manufacturers. But and we're talking about these incentives. Do they need to meet all 5? Is that what we're saying, or is it just whether they meet 1 or 2? I know you said it's staff reviewed, so potentially there's some wiggle room there. But I just didn't know what the thought process was. Was it, you got to meet all these things?
Well,
or?
I would say, certainly there needs to be a baseline, even if it's a pretty low floor for each category. And, where my previous employer, right, was at the state level, and our flagship program, okay, was only 10 full-time jobs and $100,000 in CapEx. And that's because everything gets reviewed, right, and looked at. So that number as a floor is not one that it's important, but when you see how low a criteria is for the state level, and in 2022, we did, 11 billion, and I think 15,000 jobs. It's really more about, having that expectation of CapEx, jobs and wages, and then staff and city council really get together and seeing, is this a project we want in the community, and how much do we want to incentivize it?
And I would just add that also a review if you're going to cannibalize some existing businesses, right? So maybe you're not going to incentivize someone that's in your same position that's just going to be competing with someone you already have, right? So you're going to be looking for that as well.
And I also don't want to be subsidizing a company that was going to move here anyways. We should have some criteria that separates that, right? If I was going to open a business, but I see that there's an incentive program, then I go and apply for that incentive program just to try to get some money back, claw some money back, but I was going to do it anyways, then that, you know,
How do you figure that out, though?
I know.
Vice Mayor?
Well, to the point of like having two businesses or a business that has two locations and then it's opening up a third one, they probably weren't going to geographically go to Melbourne if they've got two locations in Palm Coast, right? So, you know, they were probably going to expand within their local footprint regardless, whereas like a business that, say, has a plant in Georgia and a plant in Tennessee, now they're looking for a third location, that would be different because now they've got a wealth of options to kind of choose from. So I just want to make sure we're not like subsidizing or providing welfare for businesses that are already here or intend to be here already because of the local, whether they live here or whatever the case may be.
Well, I think that would come, because all of these have to come before us, right? So that would come during
Yeah,
that,
we'll have the chance
analysis
to review that
process.
stuff.
I also was curious, well, two things. Number one, somebody mentioned already having some warehouses. Obviously, those impact fee credits or incentives would not be available to a company that comes here into an existing warehouse. So what's the alternative for that business? Ad valorem?
Tax
Okay.
abatement, or Craig has some other strategies he wants to go through with you
Okay.
as well. Just going back to your previous discussion, Astor Defense, we did not provide an incentive to. They came to our door with a lease in hand, right? They were ready to come. They just needed us to help them connect up some of the pieces, right? So we didn't offer and they didn't ask. But that's one way you know, right? How far along in the process were there? If you're competing with another community, then that's probably when you're a finalist with another community, that's when you're really getting into this part.
Gotcha.
Right? Not before.
Astor Defense, is that considered foreign direct investment because they're a UK company?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then they get all their stuff out of Vietnam anyways, so I'm familiar with these guys, so.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, okay, so it does. And I mean, that's another piece. I mean, President Trump right now is really kind of showing us how, you know, a masterpiece on foreign direct investment, right? And I think we're open to that from what I understand, but I just want to make sure this council is good with it as far as, you know, overseas companies coming in and landing and putting Americans to work, right?
Sure, that comes up. So foreign direct investment is great. It's fantastic. And again, Astor Defense was a great project for the city. You know, I think the only thing that people want to stay away from are the FCOCs, the foreign countries of concern, which, you know, probably wouldn't get a lot of traction with any of us to begin with. But in terms of FDI, sometimes maybe people who aren't in the game might be quick to associate FDI with a bad country, and it's really not like that. A perfect example, Astor Defense.
Yeah, and the State Department wouldn't let us engage with them anyways.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Please proceed.
good with that. I mean, either way, it's an investment in our community. You know, I think some of my biggest thoughts on that are negative are when it's adjacent to U.S. military bases or strategic assets and things like that. That's when, you know, you start thinking about whether they should be here or not. You know, that's not the case in Palm Coast. So, you know, it's money coming in, it's employing locals, it's money staying within our community. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, for example, Town Center, have we marketed to any foreign investors? Have we done that? Or has the landowners, I don't know what the answer is.
I'm not familiar with any specific,
Nor am I.
yeah.
Okay. Just curious. All right, thank you.
And then as we proceed, again, today's presentation was meant to be more of a Kickstarter about the topic of incentives. You know, depending on, you know, to what extent the city really wanted to get out there and look at additional incentives beyond the first two that we just went over. You know, certainly, you know, we could do a deeper dive, job creation for targeted industries, you know, wage threshold bonuses, infrastructure assistance, things like that. I don't believe any of those are particularly on anyone's radar at the moment, but certainly wanted to just put those out there as potential other ideas based on the direction of council.
Any thoughts on these?
I mean, to me, all of to the point that was made earlier, you know, if there's a track record of these types of incentives being successful, then I agree with them. I don't know what that looks like, whether that's been, you know, explored fully or this is just different options. But really, it's what are other people doing that are being successful in this space and trying to do that. And so if that's what this is, then I'm for it. You know.
So my thoughts on these, I definitely think the fast track permitting is something we should do. I know we do move quickly. I know there's been a little bit of a stigma because the companies that come through and have a hard time always, you know, seem to get a lot more traction as far as notoriety and their experience than the ones that move smoothly through and everything, you know, is perfect and they open their doors and there's no issues at all. But let's definitely, I think, I'm definitely in favor of fast track permitting. These others, I'm not a really big fan of, to be honest with you, because I feel like we're getting into subsidizing the running of business expenses. I also think that there's ability for abuse, kind of fudging on numbers or whatever it may be in order to kind of meet these qualifications. So I don't, particularly the first three, I think obviously the Green Build grant is a little bit different. You can't really falsify that. It is or it isn't. So I'll leave that up to you all as far as what you feel or what you think there. But the first three, not a fan of those. Definitely fast track permitting, and then I'm open to the Green Build as well.
So for the site development one specifically, I mean, whether we're giving it back as an incentive or whether we're actively pursuing it from our budget, you know, to get utilities and infrastructure up to site ready, we're paying for it one way or the other, or we're not at all. So to me, that one's kind of, we're paying it one way, you know, whether it's, we're trying to develop sites.
We have some site-ready places, you know, but if you will only lease and not buy, in other words, companies want to be able to have a future get in, get out if they have to, and so they'd rather buy the land. That gives them an option. If you do a 20-year lease, 40-year, 50-year lease, it's a problem for them nowadays. I would think the opposite, but it's not. They'd rather be able to buy the property so they have full control.
Yeah. Another thing that the concern, which was brought up by a resident as well, is, you know, you basically give people incentives for several years, and then as soon as the incentives dry up, then they pack up and they move to the next site that's going to give them incentives. So how do we couple these incentives with some sort of guarantee that when the incentives stop, they're not just going to leave? And I know you can't dictate the business environment.
Make it longer. Instead of 5 years, you do 10 years. I mean.
Right, but then what happens if you have a recession in between? They're stuck existing and paying the taxes and all those things.
Well, you know, I think that, you know, certainly there are examples of incentive chasers and perhaps companies that do leave once a certain incentive is up. And while I don't have any data on this, you know, I'd be willing to gauge that, you know, certainly that isn't the case with most companies. And that, you know, once a company has sunk a certain amount of CapEx into a property, and as long as their revenue is looking good and they're good on workforce, that, you know, most companies wouldn't say, well, we're just going to close up something that's going well
just because of the
down another incentive package.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense too. I just want to make sure, and I like to the point, it's probably, those that do it is probably a small percentage, right? It's not the norm. Just want to make sure that, you know, we're not continuing to give a ad valorem incentive every 5 years to a new company in a warehouse because we can't keep them there for more than 5 years. And then we're never actually seeing the benefit of that tax-based growth, you know?
And certainly a big component of that is, you know, if we have companies approaching the city for whatever incentive, right? A big thing for me is right out of the gate, although you don't want to ask it too fast because you want to seem rude, but how is your project capitalized, right? And show us how your project's going to be capitalized. And, you know, you get a good feel for, you know, who might be really trying to hang on to those incentives and who isn't.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Again, incentives are an important tool, but we don't need to lead with them, and they should not be, our complete play. More importantly than the incentives, though, as far as what I wanted to impart today, is that we need product to incentivize. So there's nothing linear about leads that a economic development organization receives in terms of the frequency, how often they come in over a certain period of time, the asks. But this is an example of the leads that we've received since January of 2025. It's 15 leads, and the average ask per lead is 145,000 square feet, and the average job of each lead has been 160 jobs. Currently, as of right now, in terms of a building ready to go, the largest that we have is 11,000 square feet. Right, we're going to have, it looks like another 17,000 square feet come up in a different facility in July. And Jason, Ray, and myself have been talking to a developer who's looking at doing something roughly, just to put a very round number on it, in the 50,000 square foot range.
For reference, how big is BJ's?
BJ's is about 150,000.
Okay,
Roughly. Might be a little more, a little less, but it's roughly.
What the average request would be.
thank you.
And so, as we move forward through the rest of the presentation, this is really something that I mentioned the last three agenda items on this presentation are going to kind of tie together. And while incentives are important, when we talk about the biggest thing right now for companies looking for sites is product availability, speed to market. And when our average ask, just as an example, since January is 145,000 square feet, then if we really want to get in play for some of these bigger projects, not necessarily elephant projects at all, but bigger projects, then we have to really start looking at our site and building inventory, which is where I left off in my previous presentation to council. So with that, our current inventory for an existing building is 11,000 square feet, another 17 looking at coming online. There was a building that was roughly 30,000 square feet of IND1 with another 7,000 square feet of office space. But that building has gone off the market and not necessarily to an investor, but that building's not available at the moment. And that's as of 2 weeks ago. So with that, right, there's a lot of talk about Track 17. Track 17, right, we all know it's about 110 acres of city-owned land. And what we really like about it are the strategic assets that are already baked into it. It sits on a 4-lane divided highway with direct access to 95, and across PV grade is a FP&L substation with 10 megawatts. That 10 megawatts is kind of a unsung hero, especially right when we're talking about early in the presentation, if we're talking about not an existing building, but a site. Having 10 megawatts going right up to Track 17 is certainly an asset for us that we like a lot. And in addition to that FP&L substation, of course, is the city's water and wastewater right next to that. So with that, I know a couple times, either in conversations with individual council members or from the dais, there's been talk about Track 17 and the entitlements on it and the right of first offer on it. And Jason is going to help us kind of walk through that.
All right. So, like Craig said, there's been a lot of conversation around Track 17, and we wanted to try to clear up a little bit and give you the whole picture of how we got here. So, in the Palm Coast Park DRI, 74 acres of recreational land was contributed to the city for a regional park. That was for the city to build a regional park on that land. When you heard Carl earlier today talking about the mock, as we were looking at the locating the mock for future growth of the city, we realized that the parcel that we had that was contributed for the regional park was the best place to locate that. At that time, there was still an obligation for the city to build a regional park. So we purchased Track 17 and some other portions of land around the mock to complete the lands that we needed for both projects and to still have a parcel available for a regional park. And that purchase was $5.4 million at a 39.5 an acre. So subsequently, after the Matanzas Woods Parkway extension was designed, we had another corner of land that we weren't going to use anymore. We sold that back to the original landowner at the original cost as well, and we recovered $40,000 back towards the project. In 2024, City Council amended the Palm Coast Park DRI, and among other things, they removed the requirement for the city to build the park from the DRI, and then also added industrial uses to Track 17 and also Track 5 as well. So looking forward towards the potential for this site, as we discussed earlier, it's 103 acres with approximately 65 acres of uplands. It's not a cleared site, so it would still require clearing, the site work, environmental permitting. One thing Craig did budget for and is currently underway is the wetland delineation for the site right now. We need entitlements for the site. So when it was dedicated as parkland, there wasn't a need for the entitlements. They were considered as part of it. The parkland and the industrial or commerce park would have a different set of trips. So we would need to acquire the transportation entitlements for the parcel, which are estimated at $3.5 to $4.5 million. And as Craig mentioned, and as most of you know, there is a right of first offer on the site, which means that the company has the right to purchase the tract back from the city by matching an offer received by the city. City staff has looked at several layouts for the site, and they're listed there. We had some planning staff lay out some buildings, and it's just some rough work, but we have an idea of what can fit on the site. It's fairly significant, up to 500,000 square foot could fit there in a single building. And we asked a couple of our continuing service providers to give us some estimates on site work, and that's the dollars that you see there. That's site work alone, not building construction. That would just be for a pad-ready site for someone to go vertical on. So looking forward, the site is being marketed by FPL as part of their Florida First sites. We're one of, I think, 10 or 12 sites that the FPL is promoting. As Craig mentioned, we have the substation right nearby, and when Craig receives RFIs for projects, requests for information for projects, first thing they ask about is the availability of utilities, electric, water, sewer, gas are always the first things that they ask about. We are working on creating an RFP for the site, and we're going to be looking for a little guidance here, City Council, but we've met with an industrial developer to help us look at the needs assessment for the project. How can we have a successful RFP? And he helped us refine the proposal. And he suggested that the closer it is to pad ready, the more successful we are, and that's why we're doing the wetland delineation, which was relatively inexpensive at $25,000, I think. Right. So we have kind of a fork in the road here. Should we invest in the entitlement so we control the whole process, but that comes with a high cost? But then also, it removes the variables which that industrial developer told us would help us be more successful, because that would be settled, and then we can move forward with the process. And I think either myself or Craig has been at this day before and discussed with you some of the ideas we have, if that's a takedown schedule to lower the upfront cost for a potential developer, something that we will write into the RFP as some guidelines. But we're really looking for, we're not industrial developers, so we are really looking for, what proposal do you think will be successful? So we're interested in providing some ideas, but also we want to leave it open so it's still can have a creative process put to it, and help us get the best for Track 17 if you continue down this path. I can tell you, it's not an easy decision. I'm not sure which is the best way to go. It's a lot of money. However, it would clear up a lot of stuff, and it would allow us to put together a cleaner RFP that doesn't rely on someone else getting in the way of a successful proposal, if that makes sense. I'm sure there's questions.
So I know there's only 2 slides left. If you can get through those, and then we can come back to the
Sure.
truck, because that's going to be a longer conversation, I think.
Sounds good. And so really just, Jason teed it up perfectly, right, in terms of the cost and everything that we're doing from an economic development standpoint. Right now, we see the annual budget for economic development, and we see that it's 1% of the city's annual budget. And that kind of, again, I think Jason used the word crossroads a minute ago. Where do we want to go as a city, both from our property tax standpoint and from our job and wage standpoint? So 1% of our budget is currently what we're investing in economic development. If you look to see what other mid-size cities are spending in their budget, it varies. It's everywhere from 1% to 5%. As you do research, a common number, the most common number that seems to come up is 2 to 4%. So with that, we really want to look at, I think now's the time for us to decide where we want to go. But I can tell you that if we don't invest in economic development, we're going to fall behind. And also I can tell you that if we decide to invest in economic development, we can look to be an overnight success in about 10 years, right? And that's why it's critical for us to make these decisions today so we can get this going or resolve it, whichever way to where economic development isn't such a hot topic. But now's a great time to get into the game. In my previous slide deck, I had a graph that showed that spike of manufacturing investment in the United States. The graph went from 2012 to 2022, and you saw that, or 2023, and you saw that huge spike in 2020. In my opinion, right, I live and breathe this stuff. We are still early in the book as it relates to manufacturing investment in the U.S. Florida is a great state for investments, particularly in aviation, aerospace, and defense. And we are looking at a time where next generation technologies and next generation manufacturing, particularly as it relates to aviation, aerospace, and defense being a targeted industry of ours, is really about to hit that next level of technological advancement. So the more we can do from a site and building standpoint, yes, an incentive standpoint, but also really leaning into that workforce development standpoint, the more aggressive we can act in those particular 3 sectors that I just mentioned, the better we're going to be teeing up ourselves for success. And so with that, the road to success, continuing to invest in strong economic development, again, investing and preparing in quality sites and buildings, continuing to work with our partners and leverage resources to market Palm Coast, grow and train our workforce, and continue those marketing efforts that really highlight not only what will hopefully be a site and building inventory, but all those built-in assets that we already have with our location. And with that, my slide from last time, teamwork makes the dream work. Forge a unified vision for Palm Coast that prioritizes collaboration among citizens, government, educators, and businesses, and build on that site development and education and placemaking while implementing a forward-looking industry recruitment strategy that leverages regional strengths and focuses on 21st century supply chains and generates high-quality jobs with competitive wages. And from there, we can go to Q&A.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate it. So I'll bring it back to the dais. I'll start down here at the end. Councilman Gambaro, your thoughts? Any questions?
Yeah, Craig, thank you for all the work that you do for the city and just trying to break through, to bring, you know, investment and business here to our community. And thank you for the presentation. Jason, thank you as well. When I look at track 17, is this not what we were considering for the sports complex? Is this the location? So I see Lauren shaking her head up and down. So if it is, you know, I don't see, you know, I think the priority for me would be to develop this out, to have sites and buildings and pads or whatever we need to invest business versus putting a sports complex here. I mean, I just long-term community, not that having a sports complex is not a requirement for our community, because it is, but if this piece of land is best suited with all the requirements, you know, power, water, gas, you know, that we can access it off of a major highway, even if they needed to rail something, right? And take it down to a rail spur, move it out from there, and then access to the interstate. I think it's a good site for bringing in business. So that's where I stand on this. And you know, for the right investor, they have the opportunity to move forward on you know, a different, you know, varying of options of configurations for large square foot buildings, right? Large, I mean, if the average ask is 145,000 based on those 15 leads, you know, for the last year and a half, this site can accommodate, you know, one of them, or maybe a combination of, you know, a little bit less. So I think that's great. So you think, so the estimated cost to the city in order to have this thing ready to go is somewhere between $3.5, $4.5 million?
That would be to take care of the entitlements, right? And that's why this is such a complicated topic, is because there's a couple layers of cost here. Just personal opinion, right? We've got to resolve the entitlements first and get that off the table one way or another. But then, right, let's say we get that done. The name of the game is speed to market, and that's, I just brought up the numbers again. These are pretty recent estimates, I believe, roughly say 6 months old, for what it would take to basically get the site pad ready within these three options. Obviously, I think everyone would agree that option number 2, which is the 120,000 square foot building and the 2 100,000 square foot buildings, are going to offer us the most flexibility. Again, you know, just to get ahead of it, right, a question that's come up in the past is, well, what's the ROI? Much like the leads, right, there's nothing linear about it. 100,000 square feet can generate 80 jobs or 250 jobs. That CapEx can be, you know, a huge range as well. But, you know, my thoughts are, you know, when we talk about ROI, we're talking about math. And the only certain ROI is whether it's track 17 or something else. If we don't invest or encourage or one way or another get some site and building inventory online, then we're not going to get any of those jobs for that CapEx.
What year did the city purchase the property? Let me go back to the history.
Which parcel?
2021.
21.
21, okay, so 21. And we haven't had any bites.
Well, we don't market it, well, no, answer is no.
No entitlements.
Yeah, you can't do anything there right now.
Right, okay.
You can just build a park.
Just quick, who do we pay the entitlements to?
The declarant of the Palm Coast Park DRI.
That's Burn Dog, right?
Yes.
Say again, Liz?
Or associated with
Yeah,
Burn
okay,
Dog.
or-
Yeah.
Okay.
So we didn't take care of that when we bought it?
It was because it was purchased as a park, to be used as a park, so there was no need to pay extra for the entitlements for industrial on a,
It's gonna be a while to get
Correct.
back that money.
yeah, it's, you know,
If you
because
get
it
a
was
company-
to be used for something else, so
Yeah.
we would have been overpaying if we had paid for the entitlement, so it was a smart move at the time, but things have now shifted, and, so we don't have those entitlements.
Yeah, so I can provide a little bit of history. So when, I think it was not last year, but the year before, the Palm Coast Park DRI came before us, and I had talked at that time to Barbara Theodore, who was our previous Economic Development Director, and her and I talked about the same things that Craig was just saying, is that the strategic assets or infrastructure availability for this tract were so valuable that we thought we really need to make it possible to put industrial on this tract and to really start investing in it. So that's why we did that. And now it's a matter of, is there something that can be negotiated to either get the price of these entitlements down, something else that could be negotiated within the Palm Coast CRI? I kind of leave that up to staff. But ultimately, if we were going to do the option 3, say, the minimum we would have to invest in this tract is $10 million. It's a lot of money.
Right, we're talking about 4 plus the 6, right?
Right,
Something like
yeah,
that,
the purchase of the entitlements plus the
And I was gonna ask
site
about
work.
option 3 as well. Does that, when we're doing that 140, we're gonna build it in a way that later we can also do some smaller buildings, right?
Correct.
It's just, we'll get started with a little bit right now, and then once we get rolling, we can do more.
Correct.
Okay.
You do something like, you would do all the stormwater, but then just the pad for,
Right,
Right.
gotcha. Sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to clarify
okay.
that, because I wanted to make sure that that would allow for more opportunity on that site later.
Well, then the other question is, though, I mean, is there any value in trying to purchase the entitlements, but then just marketing it without the site work, right? Because now at least you have the entitlements, and you can say, we've got this strategically placed, awesome industrial tract where we can clearly fit at least one 120 square foot building and 200 square foot buildings, or, you know, so is there value in that? I almost feel like that's kind of the way to go, rather than dumping 10 million into it.
it definitely opens up more possibilities.
Yeah.
And certainly what you just said is something I just suggested to Jason about 2 weeks ago as well. Well, you know, as we talk about the track, you know, if and when we do get the entitlements resolved, you know, to our advantage, right? Does it make more sense to try to RFP it out and kind of chop it up as they develop it? Or are we going to have this luxury of the entitlements and that right of first offer being off the table? And now, I think as Jason said, you know, we can really control our destiny more and go and market the entire track without us having to stick any costs into it. Now, the thing with that is if we did go that option, which is something we should consider, you know, I think we would really need to give it about a 9-month run of us just trying to sell that track for the uses that we want it for, right, of course. But I don't think we could market that track for 60 to 90 days and, you know, get a real feel for whether or not it was a good idea. I would think it would probably take, you know, some marketing dollars, and even more so than the money, probably, I think 9 months would be a good idea, and the right amount of time for us to just kind of put it out there without RFPing it out.
And you're talking about going, marketing it after the entitlements are purchased, right?
Absolutely, 100%,
Yeah.
yes, ma'am.
Another question I would have with that is that, you know, obviously, companies and people scoop up land that's valuable, but they don't currently have a plan for it. So how can we limit that sale in a way or require that there's some actionable development of that land fairly quick?
Right.
Because I don't want someone to buy it and then it just sits there for 15 years.
Well, and
Price-
that's a problem because that's happening right now.
Yeah, I know.
On 100, or on US
I
1,
mean, it
that's
happened in
happening.
Town Center for 10 years,
Right.
right?
So, I mean, the only way truly to prevent that is to go with
When it-
option 1,
yeah.
2, or 3. And so then we're back to spending at least $10 million. Otherwise, the option would be to try to sell it. But then again, we run into will it sit there, this very valuable piece of property, and not earn us any more money for another 2 decades? So,
I mean, I think, Vice Mayor, we'd need Marcus's help, I think, a little bit, but, some sort of reverter clause or buyback clause, or, if we, in my mind, I see, if city council decides you want to move forward and get entitlements, right, I would say we do an RFP, right? Let's see how many bites we get at this RFP, right? Let's understand where we are. Are we even marketable, for a project? And then, depending on how that process goes, then if it doesn't go well, or we don't get what we're looking for, because the RFP would allow us to control the most things, including a timeline to go vertical, particularly if we're holding back on, right? You don't have to pay up front, or something creative that helps us incentivize the property, right? Well, if we're going to incentivize it, we also have the opportunity to put some rules behind those incentives, right? Some criteria. So a timeline for going for horizontal development, a timeline for vertical development, with clawback provisions if they do not meet those timelines. So I think we can write all that in. That would provide us the most protections, but also maybe you don't recover the dollars. It depends what your goal is, right? I think our goal is to have people working on Track 17, right? And getting there with the most creative way we can, I think, is our best way to protect the investment and be successful. But if we're not, we can always have this fallback, let's put it up for sale. I mean, the entitlements are a commodity. They're not going to go bad. It's almost a savings bank. It depends on, what the remainder of the economy does and what you ultimately sell that property for. But we're in a good shape. We're at $39,500 an acre. The property behind it, the industrially zoned property behind it that was recently discussed, is on the market for $11 million.
What does that come to per acre? Is it
It's
100,000 an acre.
100,000 an acre.
2.5 times? Yeah.
Right. So we have room in the market. We're not in a bad position. We just need to solve for the entitlements or not.
So is it worthwhile then, council, to give staff kind of the liberty to try to negotiate the entitlements? We don't need a budget for that right now.
No.
And just, you all see what you can do, and let's go in that
Yeah,
direction.
let's see what we can get out of it in terms of reducing those costs.
I mean, if that's the direction, I don't want to negotiate and then us not be able to have the money or hold up our end of the bargain. I mean, if we're serious, do you want me to, I mean, we're in budget season. If you guys are wanting to lean this way, then we would also,
Well, could there be a takedown for that?
Yes, we worked towards a takedown previously, where I think it was around $2 million up front, and then it was over time. There was some interest in there as well.
any type of million, we need to make sure is in the budget. Sorry.
Agreed.
So,
That starts with a L.
A cool 2 mil.
sorry. Yes, let's, if that's the direction that you're wanting us to go, let's make sure it's being considered in our current budget. And, because I think the last thing we would want is to go negotiate and then it's, okay, we need X dollar and we're further behind because we don't have X dollar.
I mean, I hate to even say it, but I mean, you just borrow the money against the value of the property. And so you don't have to come up with all the money. You just borrow the 2 or 3.5 against the property. And then you have the entitlement, you have them. And then when you sell it, you just end up with whatever the net result is. So you don't have to put the 3.5 in the budget. you just borrow that money against the value of the property and then sell the property for what you think you can get for it, and you pay off the loan, and what you have remainder is what you have left.
That could work, sir. I'm not sure we have enough equity in the property for that, but we can definitely talk to finance about that.
Well, I mean, you just said the neighboring property is listed at 2.5 times, so
Yeah.
even if that's not a realistic number, we should have a lot of equity in there to
Mm-hmm.
cover that, I think.
I don't know, I just.
No, that's a good
Yeah, no,
idea.
it's yeah,
Thank you for
yeah.
bringing it.
I think it's worth having a conversation.
Yeah, it's definitely worth having
Yeah.
a conversation, for sure. The other thing we need to give direction to staff on is what are we going to allocate out of the budget for incentives? Because right now at 1%, I think this council made some pretty clear priorities, which were infrastructure and economic development. So if we're going to make a bold statement towards actually doing something about economic development, it's my opinion that we need to increase this 1% to 3% and get a little aggressive on some of these incentives.
So just to piggyback off that, is that F-card? F-card?
F-card.
Not
V-card,
F-card,
F-card.
V-card.
F-card, that's right.
They had a presentation on economic development at the Hilton one morning, and a gentleman from the University of Florida, so he's obviously very smart, came and told us that at a minimum, the expectation should be kind of baseline is 3%. So I would argue that 3%, yes, and then, you know, if we're talking about making a splash or doing above and beyond, then it would be higher than 3%. So, but his suggestion was that 3% should be kind of the baseline standard for anybody. And he specifically called us
How
out.
about we do 2%, see how that works, and then do 3%? You know, in other words, we haven't been able to spend the 646 this
I
year.
understand, yeah. I mean, obviously, if we're changing the
Maybe,
incentives,
you know,
that,
kind of walk before you run.
right.
And so maybe try 2% next, see how that
Well,
works.
to the point though, if you've budgeted it and you don't use it, then it's not like you lost the money, right?
Well,
yeah.
yeah, it rolls over.
It rolls over, but I mean, I'm hoping that Craig talked about removing some barriers as to why maybe some of these economic
Yeah.
incentives haven't been successful.
Right.
We're only going to use all those incentives when we're being successful at this job, right, of getting companies in, so.
Yeah. And marketing that, I mean, you know, being able to kind of market these incentives as well. I don't know how you do that in your world, but I don't know how we've been marketing the Rev Grant versus how we could market some of these.
Well, you know, first, it would be a multi-layered answer, right? What would be the incentive program that the city decided upon to start looking at, right? We looked at a couple of examples. But for me, just to try to keep us, right, on focus, it's really about having that inventory for us to incentivize, promoting the incentives, but making sure that we're leading off with some strategic assets that I like a lot, especially if we're talking about Track 17, you know, as it relates to I-95, lower cost of living, high quality of life, and really Palm Coast is, you know, center to, if I'm not mistaken, the second and third hottest job markets in the United States right now being Jacksonville and Orlando. And then you throw in, you know, all the activity in Volusia and the Space Coast. So, you know, when we promote, you know, we want to promote great site and building inventory, all the strategic assets I just listed, and make sure that we're including incentives in that conversation. But certainly, right, I think a couple times today, the topic has come up of not wanting incentive chasers. So with that, and when it comes to marketing, you know, I think we start talking about incentives once we start getting a project, you know, that's real. But making sure that we already have that incentive program already in place, right, to get that hook in them. But, you know, instead of going fishing with incentives, you know, let's get some companies that are well capitalized, really looking for a site and not just tire kicking, lean into our strategic assets, and then once we know that we have a real project in our hands, again, creating that incentive program first, but then really starting to talk about how we want to incentivize the project from that dollar standpoint.
So then, Craig, what do you recommend? What's your recommendation for us today?
Well, the short answer is instead of, to be honest, you asked, right? Instead of focusing on incentives, which are important, we have got to get ahead of the site and building inventory. Otherwise, we don't have anything to incentivize. Right? I mean, we could come up with incentives where we're throwing money at the company, but if we don't have a site or a building for them to come into, well then, we don't have anything for them to come into. So, honestly, again, I live and breathe this stuff inside of work, outside of work. I came here from a high-performing team of about 65 people that worked pure economic development, and we did about 11.2 billion just in 2022. So I follow this stuff all the time, and it's sites and buildings. And when I say sites and buildings, again, I mentioned it in the beginning, just for the way I speak, right, infrastructure is included in that phrase. But the name of the game is site and buildings. Again, I just went through the strategic assets that we have. We do have nice cards. We're not in the middle of someplace so far out that we need to try to promote incentives as a first tagline just to try to get someone's attention. We're in a hotbed of activity, but we don't have the inventory. And even if today we decided to, okay, we are going to commit either X amount of dollars to inventory or we're going to resolve Track 17 before dinner, we're still looking at time, to get that resolved. So to answer your question, I didn't mean to digress there, but it's an easy answer, and it's focused on our site and building inventory. Now, how we get there, right, a lot of financial complications, we just walked through it. Or the short answer is sites and buildings.
So step one is track 17.
Yes, sir.
And then past that, continue to focus on sites and buildings in other locations.
The other thing there was a big section here about impact fee contributions, and I think that can help you take that step to additional sites that are not owned by the city, right? That can be helpful because you're trying to reduce some of those upfront costs, some of that gap that Craig mentioned, where they're estimating, but they're coming up short of their needs, where you can directly assist. Even if that company isn't ultimately successful, you still have another building in your community that someone else can move into, and you've contributed to getting that opportunity. So I think that strategy has some merit to it. It's expensive. That's the only thing.
My biggest concern in terms of some of this stuff, right, the site work and things like that is ROI on that. And, the variability of whether, it's, as you put, a 20-job company with X amount of CapEx, or it's a much larger investment that's going to pay itself off quickly in terms of our ad valorem revenue and things like that, job creation, et cetera. And so I think through the RFP process, we can kind of vet that as well, right? And say, maybe you're not right for this site because it cost us $20 million to get it here. We're going to need to have some kind of return on that investment in order to feel good about the money we sank into it. Right. But a lot of things are unknowns until you get the offers, right? So obviously we can work on that as they start to come in.
Vice Mayor, I think we should do all the above. Market in the way that you're saying it, right? Palm Coast is awesome. Come work, live, play here. Let's have the incentives package, whatever we decide that percentage is, so we can have that tool in our tool bag, right? Let's get the entitlements so we can facilitate. Bring the people in that we need, that we think will, it'll bring us up to the next step to recruit companies that will engage. And then lastly, market these, not market us, but I mean, let's, these incentives will have an impact past city property that we own, the other private land that's out there, that those incentives I think will ring true as well. So, and then it doesn't hurt. I mean, it does cost money. It'll cost us some money, but it doesn't hurt to do an RFP, just like on the golf course. Let's see what we can get and let's figure it out.
No, I agree.
So then do we want to set aside a million for the impact fee and/or ad valorem incentives?
Vice Mayor,
what do-
if
we need-
for-
We need direction as far as budget goes.
Yeah, for tax abatement, it's in arrears, right? We have them pay it in advance, then we review
Okay.
then we review their performance, and then we provide the rebate. So you don't really have to budget for that until you get, because of how the calendar works,
Yeah.
you don't have to budget for that in advance, the tax abatement portion of it. You would have to be prepared to budget for it when, a tax abatement agreement comes in front of you. You'll have to make sure.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So
Right.
once we get the tax abatement agreement, we would need to budget for it.
Yes,
Right.
and those come back to you. They come back to you for approval.
Yes.
Can I just, I got everything that you, just in essence of time, I don't know if you're trying to be here past 5 o'clock, but I had everything that Councilmember Gambaro said, also with get the chamber more involved, so maybe they can help with this additionally. And then let us put together the budget, and then if you see that more money needs to go to economic development, let's give you that option that you see some additional monies can be set aside for that. But we don't know where our numbers are gonna land yet. We're a little early, it's only just right around the corner, but let us put together those numbers, and then when we're going through the budgets line by line, tell us, hey, no, we got a little extra money here, let's put it towards economic development.
That's fine. We just need to make sure, is everybody in agreement with the incentives that were laid out, the criteria? Was there anything that anybody wanted to change? I think those were recommended by staff, but I want to make sure we're giving clear direction here.
Job creation, waste.
So it was, there's the 2 tiers, remember, and then one was the create minimum of 15 new jobs, the wage, the capital investment, and then the financial stability.
If it's helpful, Vice Mayor, ground up was 20 or 25 jobs and a $5 million investment. And we are in the 4th of a 5-year abatement, REV grant. And their taxable value on their building has increased by 35% since they purchased the building in 2021. And our investment in that company total, when we're done with the 5th year, is going to be about 60 to 70 grand,
Okay.
depending on next year's taxes.
Okay, thank you for that.
And Vice Mayor, Councilmember Sullivan mentioned 2%. Because I know the city manager's trying to figure out the numbers for the budget. Is that acceptable, or do you guys want to go to 3%?
So the caveat that, obviously our tax monies is a limited resource, right? So, the money that we're spending for this is coming out of something else, right?
Right.
Most likely. So I'm okay to work with it, but I really do feel like we need to start putting some money into this.
Well, I think you put the 3% aside, because if you don't use it on it's economic development, right? So whether it goes to entitlements or it goes to incentives or whatever it is, we can earmark those dollars for different things. But if we're going to make a statement and say we're here to actually do something about economic development, then I think we need to do at least.
Right. I don't want to be here in 2 years talking about 92% and 8%.
Right.
We've been talking about this for like 8 years now.
Yeah.
Let's fix it.
Is that the direction?
Well, I'd at least roll over, whatever we roll over from this year, subtract that from the.
Yeah,
3%.
absolutely.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, not
That'll be the
adding
starting
3%,
number.
but
I'd still say 2%, but.
3% total.
3% is what people want, but, I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, whether it's at the county, whether it's at the city, it's Flagler County. And, we haven't been successful,
yeah, well,
not been successful.
we're putting faith in you, Craig. Let's go.
I'm assuming that our this year's budget for economic development is probably our highest ever investment in economic development.
Yes, it's grown each
So-
year. And
So to the point of us not being successful, we really haven't made a real effort at it. We're already at 1%, which is 2% lower than what the industry standard would be, and that's our best effort ever, right? And so
Well,
Vice
there
Mayor.
have been other efforts. in the past.
I could be proven wrong.
I mean,
Have been before. plenty of times.
We had a, you know,
Going the wrong service, man.
10
Well-
years ago, we had a $500,000 budget in the county for economic development.
Well, here's the thing. So the budget has to be approved by us. When we get the full budget, if we say we can use, if we drop the economic development down to 2% because we need this 1% to go to a different project, we still have plenty of time to do that.
Okay.
But let's be conservative. Yeah. Let's be conservative, put the 3% aside, and then we can tinker with the numbers as we approve the budget.
Madam Vice Mayor, just one thing, we haven't gone out to public comment on this yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Do we have public comment on this issue? All right. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the dais. Is that the direction? Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate it.
I have
All right.
it.
Stamped. Moving on. Next item is item E5, Fire Department Overview Presentation.
Chief Berryhill needed to leave. If you don't mind, can we table this to the June 10th workshop? It's
Absolutely.
not time sensitive.
Okay. So we'll move on to Presentation E6, Strategic Action Plan.
Jason, do you mind just putting it on, please? Vice Mayor, City Council, the changes that were made from your April 22nd workshop, we took your direction. These are prioritized. I'm going to go fairly quickly just because we need to give some direction on the impact fee analysis. And I was trying to get you guys out of here by 5 o'clock. That being said, we've included your changes from your workshop. You have the presentation? Okay. Can you click? Okay, so this is infrastructure being number 1, and we are prioritizing projects to anticipate future growth. We've encompassed wastewater treatment plant 1, ensuring the MOC is still a top priority, the community center parking, repurpose of Fire Station 22, and then keeping up our robust communications efforts for informing the public about those capital projects. And all of these projects, with the exception of the wastewater treatment plant, were discussed today as it relates to the impact fees. Seeing no questions, I'll move to the next one. The next one is priority number 2, which is implement a citywide plan for better swale maintenance and performance, including stormwater maintenance and including a specific focus on swales. This is a reoccurring priority. Not much has changed from the tactics, but we did move it up to priority number 2.
And to be clear, when we say focuses on the swales, it's the performance, not the appearance.
Correct.
Yeah.
And move into number 3, which is design and implement a citywide plan for road repair and road safety. Again, this didn't change much from what was pre-existing. It's just moved into priority order, which is number 3.
Where is the citywide turn lane analysis?
That would be under 3.2, identify arterial and other roadway for safety corridor studies, prioritize segments accordingly, and pursue grant funding through FDOT, DOT, and TPO.
Okay.
I'm going to move to number 4, which is economic development. Again, talking about track 17, much of what you discussed today is including in this priority. It's just moving from year 1 to year 2 and putting it in priority order number 4.
Any questions?
Okay, number 5 is implement the Parks Master Plan. Again, not much has changed, just moving it into priority order number 5. Okay, moving to number 6, which is design and produce a technology improvement plan focused on technology for city government. This one was modified in its tactics to include the Palm Coast mobile app. It was under a previous priority for civic engagement. So that priority was removed. The app moved into technology, and it is in priority order number 6. Next is number 7, which is continue the Saltwater Canal Dredging Initiative. And this was modified to include funding for Phase 3, which was that $500,000 mark, and moved into priority order number 7.
And that was the design?
Yes,
Yeah.
design.
400. How much was that?
It's like 460,
400 or something.
480, but those were 2022, 2023 numbers. They're old, outdated numbers. We'll get a new quote. Oh, Jason, sorry, can you go back? We did also add in here, create a seawall standard that can be enforced by code, because you had previous conversations about including the code enforcement element. So that is included. Thank you. Then number 8, which is identify diverse dedicated funding sources for arts, culture, historical activities, and facilities. Nothing really changed here other than it's in priority order number 8.
Didn't we already do this through the commercial impact fee that we imposed?
Yes, it is. It is in, this is just saying that we want to continue along in those initiatives. Do you want to move this to operations, or do you want it to be included in your priority listing?
Well, I think the only thing left for us to do was to ascertain how we were going to, like, who was going to run it. I think right now Parks and Rec is managing this fund, but then.
So the ordinance creates a public arts committee under the BEAC, not through Parks and
Oh, okay, it's
Recreation.
under the BEAC, got it.
Yes.
What else do we really need to do from a SAP perspective on this?
Nothing really from a SAP perspective. It's just a future visioning that we want to include these things. I mean, it is emphasized in the Parks Master Plan, but oftentimes gets overlooked whenever we're looking at the need for sports and neighborhood parks and et cetera. There's not a special emphasis on arts, culture, and history.
Okay, then, I mean, it's my position that we've already identified the dedicated funding source. I mean, unless we're going to look for more dedicated, because it says sources as in plural. But if keeping this or prioritizing this as something that we need to, keep in the forefront of our brains of how to further arts and culture and history in the community is kind of one thing. But the fire station isn't even in this. It's in a different priority, so.
It's under
It was
8.
under priority 1.
Right, but under 8.4, which is pursue diverse funding opportunities, including grants, private partnerships to support arts, culture, historical projects identified through research and community input, and that's specifically related to Fire Station 22 and the stage.
I see, okay. Yeah, I mean, we can leave it. We have it in the impact fee, so if we want to try to also find funding sources for those specific things. I guess I was just a little thrown off by the title is all.
Sure, we can just retitle it if you'd like.
I agree that I think it should stay, because there are still things that we need to pursue, right? Like the continued development of that area in town center to be kind of a destination, right? Things like that. I don't want it to become not a priority because it's just
Stale,
not
yeah.
on our mind.
Right. Okay, we'll retitle this, but keep a special emphasis on moving forward with the arts, culture, and history initiatives. Moving into number 9, which is a new objective, quality of life for essential workers. You guys discussed several of these things at your last workshop. This is completely new. We just added in the various tactics. So we were looking at a comprehensive salary survey, looking at a cultural assessment. Not only are we making sure that we have different programs inside the organization as it relates to other municipalities, reviewing existing programs, we're just trying to meet the expectations of this new objective.
Yeah, I think 9.1 is really, really, really important, especially for our first responders that, arrive first on scenes and things of that nature. I mean, it's a lot to process, right? So,
Yep.
yeah, I support that.
Okay, moving into number 10, which is also new. This is continue moving forward with the risk and efficiency analysis. Any questions there?
Questions? Are we still waiting on people to review the RFPs for this?
No, not this one.
Okay.
It's, this one we did award to a company, and we'll be bringing forward that contract at a future agenda.
Okay, so we did award it and it just needs to come back before council.
Yes, to approve the contract.
Awesome, okay.
Next is create a charter review committee, which I'm not sure if you want to keep this one on there just because it's already moving forward We've started receiving applications, you know, just didn't want to have one and done type of priorities. It's going to be budgeted per your, it's kind of operational is what we're doing with it.
Or we could just say advanced charter review.
Yeah.
Yeah, until we basically have amendments to present, we're not done with that job, right?
Pretty important.
Yeah,
Okay, so
But
leave it
maybe-
on there.
Maybe
Leave it on
just
there, maybe
reword
change
it.
it.
yeah, advanced charter review,
Okay.
initiative or whatever, yeah.
Okay. And it's number 11, and that concludes. And so we will make a few modifications based off today's feedback, and then we will update your June 3rd agenda where you will officially adopt. And then we will bring back to you in July any related budget items for these priorities.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll bring it back to the impact fee
Public comment?
discussion for
Public-
Parks and Rec.
Madam Vice Mayor, you gotta do
I'm
public
sorry,
comment.
public comment. Jeez Louise.
SAP.
Any public comment on the strategic action plan? None. All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the dais. Any last comments? Now we'll bring it back to the impact fee discussion on fire and Parks and Rec.
Can I just give you an update on Parks and Rec? I did ask Sean to work out a few scenarios just to try and help facilitate the discussion. So just trying to define what the goal is. Is the goal to lower the fee, or is the goal removing projects? So I asked him to run a scenario that would, one, remove the DRI projects and the units that would be associated with those. We as staff included them because we're getting really close to what that's going to be, and we forecast something in that conversation within the next 5 years, right? So that's why we as staff initially included them. But you have the option to take them out because they will be discussed at the time of the MPD, right? So if the plan is to annex in additional parcels according to the comprehensive plan and then review MPDs and the previous DRIs, at that time you could negotiate what was going to be in the MPD as far as requirements, right?
Talking about the West.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the two DRI projects, Township,
Yeah.
which they also haven't been included because per those DRI DOs is that they're responsible for putting in those after the first 2 years after the first residential dwelling unit has gone up and that they've never been activated, right? So if you removed the DRIs, the new fee would still be at a 91.6% increase. So you're removing the DRI projects and you're removing the DRI's units. And then that's going to bring your current residents' obligation to 54%. So it's 47 now, and this means that future residents pay less than current residents. Does that make sense? Okay. Then I asked him to run a scenario that included taking out several of the projects because not sure where City Council falls on future policy or vision of the city building or operating these facilities. But if he ran a scenario that removed the DRIs and took out the event center or community center, we're going to call it Palm Harbor Clubhouse, a recreation center, because that could now be your contribution of a Y, not only a pool, but also a gym space, right? Because the city doesn't have a recreation center that has its own gym, if you will. And you took out the cultural arts facility. I know that's kind of backtracking what we just said in our strategic action plan. We kept everything as far as the stage, like lighting, the awning, et cetera, but a future building for cultural arts. If you remove that, those projects and the DRIs and the units, the fee would be 63% increase at $2,981.
So wait a minute, what are we removing? What projects are we removing in that second scenario?
A recreation center, a cultural arts center, and the Palm Harbor Golf community center. And the DRIs, their projects and their units.
When you say a recreation center, what was the plan for that?
A true recreation center that had multi-purpose rooms, a gymnasium, very similar to what's going to be in the Y, a fitness room, et cetera.
Okay, but this doesn't touch the Y.
No.
Okay.
And then a third scenario is keeping the DRIs in, but keeping those projects out would be a 73.19% increase, and that's $3,166. So all three scenarios that were ran are still, the parks impact fee is over 50%. I tried and get you guys some additional information. If you want to provide some more direction, but I just don't know if you see the city operating or constructing any of those facilities.
Do all three of these scenarios bring the current resident obligation to 54%?
Yes.
No, it wouldn't,
wait,
because
current-
the third one wouldn't.
Oh, no, the third one wouldn't. It would be, it's 47%
The current resident obligation.
in the third scenario, because the DRIs are included.
Okay, so, and that third scenario brings it to 73%?
Yes.
I don't think that we can take out the DRIs because we know that future growth is coming in before 2050. To me, it doesn't make any sense to remove that.
The only question I would have is that, would we be able to capture that in the next study?
Well, I'm sure we would, but I mean, if the whole premise of this is to be able to plan and save for beyond this impact fee study, then I don't know how you can in good faith remove those DRIs.
No, I know. I guess my point is that if you're going to build some parks out west, I don't want the new person moving into Seminole Woods basically paying for it, so to speak. And I know we can't really control that, right? But collecting it now is definitely basically putting the onus on kind of older residents, right? They won't be super old residents. They're ones moving in now, right? But by the time there's homes out there to enjoy the parks out west, we're talking 5 to 10 years from now. So these people will have been paying for the last 5 years into a park that's going to go way out west. And we have the opportunity to negotiate things potentially to where we're not footing the whole cost there in terms of some of these parks and things like that.
Yeah, I think you're always going to kind of face that with impact fees.
Yeah,
though,
I know
you
it's true. I know I'm making that
Yeah.
argument and thinking in my head, well, I can't ever necessarily dictate where that money's
Right.
coming from and how
No.
it's going to a specific location.
But I mean too, like if you excuse me, if you build a park, you're going to be relieving pressure from another park.
Right.
You
No,
know?
that's true.
So, I mean, I get what you're saying, but I just think that the DRIs have to, now I do like the possibility of the last scenario, but my question would be, if we go that route, is council willing to say, okay, we're willing to go this last scenario route, but we're going to impose it all now? Because we're dropping it by a great amount, but we need to start collecting on those monies. So I would advocate, if that is the direction we go, then it's, look, we've been willing to give on these 3 projects that are important to us, but we want to start collecting that money now.
I think that's a good trade-off. What are we talking about? If we're talking about, what is it, 70 what percent?
73.19. I think the difference is like $300.
Okay, so it's going from like $1,800 to $1,500, and difference, I think, is.
No. It would be,
3620 to whatever.
I have the difference written down, right, between the previous and the old, so
Yeah.
the difference was what, 18? Yeah.
1791.
Yep.
so this left in the sports complex, it left in the trails, it left in the neighborhood parks, kind of those things that are,
They're core.
right, and then it's an expansion at the Southern Recreation Center. Trying to keep going down. It keeps in the stage additions.
Yeah, I mean, the stage to me makes sense, especially with the Y, because that's going to create like a nexus of a couple things happening at the same time.
But the sports complex not on track 17.
With
correct?
lights,
With lights in your neighborhood.
yes.
And then you're
All
gonna,
those things.
yeah, and then you're gonna come back and say, it's not okay. But, yeah, but.
I'll be
all
the one
seriousness, it's
person at the
not-
council
Not on
meeting.
track 17, I just want to be clear. Because we talked about track 17.
Yeah,
earlier.
no.
No, yeah,
This is just in general,
Correct.
okay.
Okay, so your proposed parks impact fee is $3,620.
Right.
And the scenario that I gave you was keeping the DRIs in, but removing the golf course, community center, a rec center, and a cultural arts building, and that would be $3,166.
so 360.
So your current dwelling
460.
unit is 3620, and then this is gonna go to 3166.
We're still doing the sports complex then at 19 or 20?
Yeah.
Well, it's way out there on the plan.
Yeah, it's something we have to save towards. That's the theory.
See,
There's,
mostly be older people using it, my calculation, the way things are going.
We'll see. All right, so I thank you, City Manager, for presenting some different options for us.
So what's that final percentage? 70?
73%.
73.19%.
and it maintains that
DRs.
And it,
future residents are paying more than current
Correct, which is
residents.
very important. That's really important.
Well, that's better than 98%, so.
Yes, but I agree to the point about the phase-in. We're making some concessions here, but we need it now.
Starts
Yeah.
1 June or 1.
90
well,
days?
90 days after 1 July.
What are we doing to the golf course, just so I know?
There was like a community center built in there for that.
right, the
not
current
gonna happen,
golf
okay.
clubhouse is a triple wide trailer, and
Yeah.
it's kind of falling apart.
And that
so-
might not,
But if council's consideration is an appraisal and looking at the future of selling the golf course,
that's what I'm
then
thinking, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of,
Makes
we're
sense.
variable
the
right now.
only one is it just contradictory of the arts, culture, and history initiative. Do you see that an issue with removing
But the stage
Facility.
would still stay.
the stage would stay, it's just no facility, right? We did a town center master plan where we had an event center about 30,000 square foot,
Yeah.
$77 million.
But we're still going to do the cover and stuff like that.
Yes.
I think
Okay.
that's the most important.
Okay, so cover, that'll be the future vision of that area. And then if, there's land there, so if a private investment came in, that could be where they could go.
We'll always take a private investment
Yeah.
to help the community.
Yeah, between upscaling the stage and then Fire Station 22 remodel, I think we're covering a lot of those cultural things in the short term.
If that's council's pleasure, I just have worked with the arts and culture, history people for many, many years, and that's been their vision of having this type of facility. So, I mean, it's just hard.
And we're doing the concert series starting this week, as a matter of
Thursday,
fact. So,
yes.
bringing attention and
Hidden
visibility.
Signals, right?
That's right.
Hidden Signals.
Yeah. All right, so do we need to talk about this in conjunction with transportation, or are we good on Parks and Rec going this direction?
Okay, the only thing what was your final direction on transportation?
We haven't gotten there
So
yet.
there was one thing with the change in the potential additional funding that that's a variable in the calculation, so I don't know if they've, gotten any of those numbers back, but that would have shifted it slightly as a baseline for where we can start talking about it.
I did not get anything from Fong or the consultant about what the number would be when you doubled the state contribution from 25 million to 50 million, and then you
I don't-
also asked to remove US 1. I didn't get
Right,
any
correct.
recalculation from that.
I do know, and maybe I can work it out myself. I do know what the rate changed to by adding that. So before it was 600 something was the rate that they presented. Let me see if I can find it.
No, so.
No, no,
pre-
on the transportation for residential?
It wasn't it wasn't the actual impact fee, it was the rate that they were using. It was
Oh.
like the,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
which had that formula, which was the total amounts minus the additional funding, plus this, divided by the number of people, et cetera. Here it is right here. The vehicle miles of capacity rate is 621.68. And so I know that by doubling, based on this formula, if you make this 50 million instead of 25 million, that the new number comes out to 504.54, which I think is about a 19.8 or something % reduction.
From the 137?
Yeah, so I would assume it would be directly proportional to the impact fee as well. But I don't know where the formula goes from this rate to the impact fee, because it's not documented on this. So,
So does city council feel comfortable with your direction from the workshop that will be in your agenda packet for the 3rd is transportation, removing US 1, and doubling the state contribution to 50 million, and then whatever rate that is what we will put in for transportation? Now, it is just first read, right? It could
right,
change.
that's what I was going to say,
Right.
is that
I
we'll
do-
have the
I
opportunity to discuss.
emotionally have a problem with going over 100% on any of these, but the transportation one looks like there's no other way, but.
Well, part of the problem too is that it's 6 years, right, instead of 4 that it's been
But
reviewed.
I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you can make it 99.9, I mean, that's okay, I understand.
We're over 50, we've dropped off the edge of the cliff, so,
I guess once we go over 50, it's.
yeah.
Anything over 50 is extraordinary.
But yeah, so because we don't have those numbers back from them, I'd be interested in letting it ride and then having this conversation then,
Well, we'll see.
when we see what that number looks like.
I would still like to see, like, once we finalize where we think we're at, like, what's the total, with everything, with all the different types of impact fees included? What is the new home buyer, what is that
How much
extra
is
money
going
getting
more?
passed
Oh,
along?
Fong's come back.
Oh,
He's
he
listening.
heard me.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful to just, at the end of the day, know that number, so we could,
Or everything.
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 Everything. At the end of the day, what's getting passed
You just
along.
want to know, before with 100% adoption, we were talking about 7,000. You want to know what it looks like once we have our adjustments in.
Yeah, and that 7,000 was just like for single-family resident, what about the
Well, it affects
multifamily?
them all,
Yeah, what that breakdown is.
They already are broken down differently.
I'll explain it to you.
Okay, there we go.
So the fee schedule that you have there calculated 2 additional scenarios. So the first scenario is basically we were looking at reducing US 1 and 100, 50%, but still keep intact the 25%, 25 million in credit. So that's the rate that you will see if you compare it to the second column, or the third column, which is the existing transportation impact fee. It will increase by, for example, single family will increase by 42%. And if you just take 50% of DOT and then remove the 25 million, anticipating the reduction, then you would have an increase of 86%, which is 6,500. So that in effect would be similar to what you just asked us this morning to remove US 1, which is about 33 million, and then bump up the 25 million to 50 million. So the number will probably come out to be similar to the yellow column. So that would be an increase of approximately about 86% for single family. We're going to true up the number and the percentages for you because we have not do the calculation yet. And of course, the far right column is the one that was at the maximum defensible number.
So Fong, let me get this straight. So I'm looking at the far right column under single-family detached. All the way to the right, we had it 137%, and then it was 82.95. Okay.
82.95, yes, sir.
So if we go to 53.5 million in funding, that's removing, what, that's US 1? So the yellow column to the left of the blue column.
Yeah, the yellow column is based on, because the prior scenario that we were basically anticipating that council may want to ask us.
Okay.
Is basically because we need approximately 50% match in order to receive the other 50% from DOT.
Right.
So we reduced the 106 or 105 million down to basically 52 million. So that would fall under the yellow column. And
So
that
yellow,
would give,
yellow would represent 52 million instead of the 50
Correct.
that I suggested, right?
Right.
Because we're using 50%
Right.
as the
But it
threshold.
drops the fee to 86%.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, so,
but city council this morning said, increase it to 50 million. So roughly 50 and 52, the number is going to come out to
right,
be
this is
about the
very
same.
similar to what I
Very similar
asked
to a
about.
column two, yellow column.
Oh,
That's better than 99.9.
Works for me.
Okay. All right, this is very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you for this. So I'm looking too at some of the non-residential. So if you look at manufacturing, which again, we're trying to increase economic development here. It decreases that impact fee by almost $1,000 per 1,000 square feet, which is a pretty good amount. And then, of course, I brought up the daycare. That drops it by almost $3,000 per square feet, per 1,000 square feet. Hotels, too. I mean, hotels are a really good source of tax for us. So that it drops that one by $1,200 per 1,000 square feet. So I think from a non-residential standpoint, this scenario helps our efforts to increase economic development and bring in, I shouldn't say economic development, but bring in more commercial.
We also look at the quick, around some of the close jurisdiction around us here, just for comparison purposes, but we'll provide a table for you next week to show you that. But for example, single-family detached, some use a tier approach based on the number of square feet. Mm-hmm. So we look at around approximately 2,200 square feet of single-family housing units. So you look at anywhere between 6,000 to about 10,500. So with the increase of 8,200, which is not way off base at all, we would be right in the middle somewhere. But we'll provide that table for you.
so there would be different rates for different sized single-family homes? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you could do that.
Yeah,
You could do a different tier, let's say.
I think that also addresses the affordable housing issue with it too, right?
Yeah, that would
Because
help.
a smaller home that's affordable would be less impacted by the impact fees.
Right, I've seen a jurisdiction, they have a tier approach or step-up approach. Let's say under 800 square feet homes has a different impact fee, and then from that to 1,200 square feet, and then 1,200 to like 2,000 square feet, and 2,000 to 2,500, and then above 2,500, for example.
Right,
So they
so
have like 6
a
different
large
categories for
family
single
home,
family.
right.
You can do that.
So I guess the last question for us is, I think I want to make sure I understand everything we agreed on. So the fire and the Parks and Recreation, we're going to execute right away, no phasing, right?
That's what I would like to see, yes.
Okay.
With what we just said.
Yeah, I want to recap, but moving to this, on the transportation piece, where do you guys stand on, if we were to drop to let's say the yellow columns, do we phase it or do we start?
That's so, to that point, potentially you could phase it. The weird thing about that law is it says between 25 and 50, it needs to be phased 4 times. if we were going to adopt something as drastic as what was presented, I would definitely advocate for a phased approach, because that's a lot to bite off in one chew. The yellow reduces this impact a little bit, right? So I have less of a fight in me to fight for a phased approach because of that. So I'd be interested in hear everybody else's thoughts and think about, being influenced by that, so to speak.
I think my whole argument early on was let's try to find a middle ground based on numbers that we can actually see and digest. And I think, Fong, this is very helpful.
This was helpful, thank you.
You all.
And then, so the overall number, I guess for me, at the end of the day, it's going to be, what's the overall number that's going to get passed through that home builder developer to that
And buyer?
that buyer, that young school teacher and firefighter that want to buy a house? What does that look like? And
So to answer your question, Councilman Gambaro, if we went with the current figures, it would be $10,544 per dwelling unit. That's single family.
Right.
And that's single family detached. So that's not considering townhomes and things like that, which are going to be a little bit less. It was $12,771, so it's a good chunk less than what we were looking at
It's
the
a
beginning
big
of today.
amount less.
And even depending on the size of the house, if we do
You do the tiered.
Right, so even further or lesser.
you got to make
impact.
sure you still have enough, adjust the tiers, so people with a 2,500 plus square foot house is probably going to pay more. Then,
Yeah, people that can afford the 5-bedroom house can afford the extra $2,000.
Yeah, so I'm with Councilman Miller on this. I think with these adjusted figures, we should start collecting immediately. I would be open to looking at the tiers as well, though.
Yeah, me too.
The tiers for the amount of housing, be very clear, not the tiers on a payment schedule. These should be paid up front if we're going to make some of the concessions that we've made today.
I agree.
Just to give you an update on the existing bills. There were 4 bills introduced in the legislature. One of them defined what extraordinary circumstances are. Those 3 bills have been withdrawn. So the only one that's surviving is a 1080, which basically changed a little bit in terms of extraordinary circumstances. It changes from supermajority or 2/3 to
Unanimous, right?
unanimous.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be effective until October 1st if the governor signs it. And then the other one is, it has to be phased in. So if we adopt it prior to that, then we are not under that requirement. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that.
What do we need for the vote prior to
We just need a supermajority.
super 4?
4 or 5, yeah.
And it doesn't matter who's here, it's 4.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So are we good with that direction? Are you on board with that, Councilman Gambaro?
good with it.
Okay.
Do we need to open it up for public comment again? We already did this, right?
Fong, are you clear on the direction so you can relay back to the consultant for updating the report?
Yeah, so I just want to repeat that, if I may, is that you want to increase to 50 million, which is similar to column yellow here.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the other one,
Yeah.
and then the other one is removing US 1 improvements from the equation.
Correct.
And then you would possibly want to explore the single-family residential in terms of square feet. Like a tier approach, we may introduce 3 categories or 5 categories, and for you to consider.
Yes, please.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
We're good with that?
Good.
All right, awesome. So with that, we will go out to final public participation. Any members of the public that would like to discuss anything that was not on the agenda?
I almost don't want to.
Good early evening, Mr. Davis.
Hello again. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Jeremy Davis. I want to start by thanking this council for stepping up and finally taking action on the issues I've raised. It's encouraging to see movement after so much time spent waiting for change. Your willingness to engage has not gone unnoticed. But while I appreciate these steps, I want to emphasize that the broader system, the departments, the processes, still need to be held accountable. This isn't just about one decision, it's about ensuring that mistakes like this don't happen again, and that the residents don't have to fight for years to get problems fixed. This is an opportunity for the city to show its commitment to accountability, not just in my case, but across the board. Thank you for hearing me, and I hope we can continue moving forward together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the dais regarding matters not on the agenda from our council members. Councilman Miller?
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor. So just wanted to thank the staff specifically for the Memorial Day event. You guys did a great job and, allowed us to highlight something that's important to our community and important to us as a council. So just wanted to thank everybody for that. I'll give my sports update. So Gators softball made it to the College World Series over the weekend. So they won their super regional series. So final 8 teams playing in Oklahoma City. An unheralded team, Gator golf team, which is a 5-time national champion, made it to the semifinals. So they made it to the final 8 teams, and now they started match play, so individuals against individuals, and they won that match today against Texas. So now they're the final 4 teams that are left playing for the golf national
California.
championship. I'm not sure where who they play there.
Carlsbad.
Yeah, I'm not sure which course it was, but I don't know if it rotates either. I think that's it.
All right.
I have them, I'm beat from the day's
Yeah,
work. So
It was a long day. Councilman Sullivan?
Right, again, thank you for Memorial Day, especially all the residents who
Yes.
came. And it was very nice, very interesting, and some very, sorrowful things have happened over the years, which we celebrate Memorial. We're not really celebrating, we're talking about people whose lives were lost in the various conflicts we've had. So I thought it was well done, good speeches, and weather held.
Yes, it
And
did.
the other thing was, I did attend the dedication of the 23rd, I believe, Turtle over on Colbert Lane. The little park there is interesting. That is not a city park. That is done by the people in Grand Haven, have taken care of that. And the people who paid for the original Quilty, who was in the park, the turtle was in the park, paid for the new one. So they've got about a $10,000 investment in turtles. So it was the same couple who did both of them. And there's still a $5,000 reward if anybody ever figures out who stole about
original.
2.5 years ago now, the original. That's it.
Thank you, Councilman Sullivan. Councilman Gambaro?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I echo everybody's thoughts on Memorial Day. It's always a tough one, for sure. Vice Mayor, thanks for doing a great job in hosting. You did an outstanding job, so I want to thank you for that. And then thanks for a great meeting. These are tough issues. And I think we're showing our residents what right looks like, and I'm thankful to be working with the 3 of you and the city leadership and everybody in the back. We recognize all the hard work you do. This is not easy stuff. And it's not easy because our residents expect, a superior level of service that we're trying to provide, and we fight through it. But there's priorities and there's hard choices that we got to make every day, and I appreciate Lauren with your guidance and getting us through some of these tough topics. And then the last thing, just not now, but Lauren, whenever you could just give me an update on when you think that RFP for the golf course might come back for us to review and make a final decision on that moving forward. But other than that, thanks for a great meeting.
All right, thank you for that. I will echo the comments on Memorial Day. I also want to say thank you to Melissa Trumbull. She was absolutely beautiful
Crushed
voice.
it.
She did a great job out there. To the Matanzas ROTC, to Mr. Giuliano for the bagpipes. As usual, wouldn't be an event without his bagpipes. Everybody else who just contributed to a beautiful ceremony, thank you so much. And yes, thank you to the residents that came out. It really is special when our community comes together for that. I also want to thank you all and staff for the meeting. Like you said, a lot of really tough stuff. Thank you for some creative problem solving on the fly, city manager, and Fong as well. Is he still in here? No, he left again. He just comes in and out to deliver presents. But really appreciate it because, yeah, this stuff is tough, and there's been some respectful dialogue, and so I appreciate that. So, concert series on Thursday. Don't forget, it's the first one. I think it's at 6 p.m. 6 p.m. at Town Center Stage. I think that's going to be a really cool thing that we do over the next several weeks, so definitely come out for that. With that, we'll take it to our legal counsel.
Nothing, Madam Vice Mayor.
Awesome. Thank you so much. City Manager.
No comments, thank you.
Great. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Awesome. Perfect timing. They're watching you.
I just turned it on.